else is new, I guess. So it's great to see a new turnout. Thank you. Okay, so there's a few of you who'll be happy to hear that I'm not talking as much as I did last year. We have Jayas, who joined the committee after last year's event. He's actually running the most of this event, so I'll just be handing over to him, and he'll be looking after most of it. So just a few housekeeping things. Fire exits, I think everyone pretty much knows this hall really, really well. There will be a session on wealth and savings, which is going to be through that door later on. So people who are listening to the inheritance tax presentation, that's in here, and then about 20, 25 of you who've shown interest in the other end, just through that door straight, and there's another smaller building, and it's got the PowerPoint and everything in there. So that's later on this afternoon. Okay, we are going to run hot topics similar to last year. There's going to be breakout sessions. We want you to mingle with new people. So sometimes being open, listening to new people's ideas, people that you don't have in your normal circle is a great way to get out of your comfort zone. So there will be some of that today. So please be comfortable with being outside your comfort zone. And we are going to address some fairly important topics. And time is short, so what we will do is please, hopefully, be as open as you can to the fact that we are all going to die one day. We all have to pay taxes, and also commitment is something that we have to make every day. So no cruising through life anymore, please. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Jayas. Jayas, it's over to you. Enjoy the event.
So afternoon, everyone. So welcome to the 2019 Hot Topics event. I think most of you know that there's three main themes for today. So we've got health, wealth, and family life. And those are obviously topics that are crucially important to us all. What we've done for the event today is we have used the connections, the experience that we have across the Samaj, and hopefully we've put on an event today that will really help you guys all for yourself, but also the well-being of others around you as well. So for those of you who attended last year's session, there were three key bits of feedback or information that you wanted on. You wanted some more information on health and just how we can improve ourselves in that regard. You wanted some information on finance, particularly inheritance tax, which we'll come on to in a second. And you also wanted to discuss ways that the Samaj can thrive and improve, how we can build our community. I think it's obviously clear that the Samaj is now very different. And we are looking to modernize that in a different way, and therefore we need input, we need active debate from you all in terms of how we actually move it in the new direction as well. So if we just go through the agenda in terms of what we're looking at, I'll just go through that. So after my initial remarks, we're going to invite Alicia along, who can take you through the Wheel of Life. The Wheel of Life is very much a case of looking at where you are at the moment across all aspects of your life, but importantly, really thinking about where you want to take yourselves in the next few years. We will then have a break, and then we have a segment on health. So we'll be starting with physical health, and Jason, who is a Samaj member and a GP, he'll be talking about diabetes. It's not the nicest subject in the world, but actually very, very common, and especially for Indians, unfortunately, so something for us to all bear in mind. Hasina and then myself will be talking about mental health, something that's, again, increasingly common and being discussed, particularly focused on stress and how we can mitigate when you do get stressed, what you can do to alleviate some of that as well. We are then delighted and very excited to have with us today Grant Thornton with us, an accounting firm. They will be running two sessions at the same time, one on inheritance tax and one on general savings. And as part of your registration, you would have said which one you would have wanted to go to. So you can attend one of those sessions. If, for example, you're married or if you're siblings, you may want to go to one topic each and then discuss some of your notes after that. But again, we've got a half an hour session on that, so hopefully you will enjoy and find that informative. We then have a final session on family life, and we've put you on these roundtables really to discuss and debate four key areas that we think are very topical around family, and we'll come on to that in a second. My request for you today is very simple. Whatever you put in today, you'll get twice as much back. So it is an open and safe environment. We want you to really discuss these topics and also make sure that you do build up the connections. We've got plenty of breaks, so do take the time to meet another friendly face and just to learn a bit more about them as well. And my promise, I guess, and hopefully I'll keep this, is that you'll all come away today learning at least one new thing, and hopefully you'll learn a few more things as well. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We do have a videographer and a photographer with us today, so they'll be taking pictures and videos throughout. If you can participate in that, then great. As you probably know, the session will be run in English today throughout, but if anyone needs any help in any translation or such, there's a number of facilitators here today, and also we have the committee members on hand as well to help out. Okay, so I'll hand over to Alicia.
Hi everyone. So, I wanted to start off with something a little bit different. Did you know 70% of our life we spend working? How many of you here wake up every day excited to go work? So far we've only got 2 people. Okay. What I wanted to ask you is, are you here out of circumstances or are you here out of choice? Do you want to make any changes in your life, or are there any areas that really you feel that you need to focus on? So I grew up, my mom was a single parent. When I grew up, I got bullied. A lot of people looked down on me, some people in our Samaj as well. And even in my family as well, like my dad's family didn't want anything to do with me, and I didn't know them. So there was also this pressure, this expectation that I had to be a grade A student, had to go to school, and I did it all. I got an education, went to university, got a degree, and then I landed my successful job. And I've been there for the last 8 years, and it's been secure. They've given me all the flexibility in the world as well, so I'm really thankful. But something was missing, something that I felt that I wasn't being fulfilled in where I wanted to be. So I had a choice. Do I stay where I am and just be unhappy all the time, keep asking for a salary rise? Or do I make a change and do something that I love doing? So I did. There were a lot of other factors to think of. Money. I needed money to go out clubbing. And the disapproval from my family because they thought it was too risky. Then there was my own belief, am I going to fail? And you just keep questioning those kind of things in your head. But in the end, I went ahead with it, and I can tell you now that this is exactly where I want to be, and I know I picked the best choice. So this was one of the areas in my life where I was able to improve massively. So the Wheel of Life is just one of the tools that can help you to get to where you want to be in terms of goal setting. So I want you to take a step back. I want you to think about where you are right now in your life. Where do you want to be? If you haven't progressed, then why not? What are you doing that's holding you back? So we're going to start off with deep diving into an exercise to unravel these questions. So I hope here by the end of the session, you'll be able to clarify the priorities that you need to set a good balance. So, what is the Wheel of Life? Does anyone know? No, nor did I, heard before, but okay, so it helps you to bring balance into your life to create success and happiness. So yeah, it is a tool for improvement. So on your handouts, you will see a wheel on the second page, and you will see some lines next to it. I want you right now to write down where is it that you want to be. So, for example, for me, in terms of physical well-being, I'll put on the line that I want a six-pack and I want to bench 18 kg. Whereas for you, it could be something else. You might want to do 10K walks every day and have 2 green smoothies a week. So if you can put down right next to it on the line where you want to be, then I want you to shade in using the diagram on a scale of 1 to 10 on where you are right now. So 1 being satisfied and 10 being fully satisfied. So you start from the middle and then work your way out. So just remember, there's no wrong or right answer. So if you feel that, you know, your love life's a mess, that's okay. That's okay. Just rate it what you feel where you are right now. So I'm going to give everyone 10 minutes, and if everyone could just talk on their tables if they feel comfortable with talking, then you can.
For example, love, I'm very happy at the moment, so I'll give myself a 10 out of 10. And my wife's in the audience as well, so I can't say that. Yeah, of course, Matthew. But if you are a 7, for example, then that's fine, and you may want to think about actually doing some more stuff with your partner, and that can come follow. So the key thing is where you are now in each of those 10 areas, give yourself an honest score. It's not a competition between yourselves, so don't start conferring notes. And if you're with your husband and wife, try not to look at each other's notes. And then importantly, think about what you want to do to get there. So you start thinking about an action plan on how you want to improve your score. Does that make sense now? Yeah?
I know, I've noticed some people are writing like they want to be at a number 10 on those lines. Be specific. So your idea of a 10 might be in terms of money, I don't know, make 100K in a year. Or just be specific so you can actually visually see what you want. That's it. The next step is your game plan. What exactly are you going to do to make that change? So I put together a little bit of my recommendations. On your sheet, maybe write down 2 habits that you are going to instill to move this forward over the next 12 months. And give yourself 12 months to do it. I would suggest maybe focusing on maybe 2 to 3 areas on the Wheel of Life. That way you can really, focus on it, and you'll get there for next year. Hopefully at the next topics event, you'll see me with abs. On my handout, I've listed a few resources there that you may find useful. These are the sort of resources that actually really helped me. If you wanted to know a little bit more about like the Wheel of Life, there's something called Mind Valley. They're really good at this sort of stuff. But any females that want to set up their own business, female entrepreneur and the Asian female entrepreneur, they're really good as well. And in terms of fitness, I use RNT. They were so good. I dropped 9 kg in the space of like 3 months. And then a few other books. The other thing I wanted to say is we are introducing an accountability partner. I won't go through the details of that, but it's just the idea of people in our Samaj connecting with each other on the same business level to kind of, it's like a buddy system, just to kind of push them up one. We also will be doing an annual review on the Wheel of Life. So in your inboxes in the next 1 to 3 months, you will see some follow-up emails to make sure that you guys are on the right track and you guys are making your changes. We also have something, so if you feel that, you are really serious on settling down for a proper relationship, you want to get married, we do have something called Lever for Life. Unfortunately, Salish has kicked me out of it, so I can't join it. But if you are interested and you want to sit down, speak to Salish. Okay, and yep, so I wanted to kind of say, and the last thing is committee members. We are here to help you. We volunteer our time to add value to your life because, we want everyone to network, to get to know each other, to grow, to develop. So if you feel that you have any concerns or you feel that you need some help in some area of your life, come to us. We can help you. Whatever you say to us stays confidential. It's a new management, there's the new cool kids, That's me. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap it up. So I decided that I didn't want to settle for a life that wasn't fulfilling me. So are you ready to make that change? Are you ready to take that step forward and start living that best life? Thank you.
I'm going to name some people, so if you could wave your hand, so if people want to talk to you about healthy things. So obviously, Jason, he was our main speaker for today. Hasina is a physiotherapist who will be talking later on. Do you want to stand up, Hasina? No, I said stand up, seriously. Okay, that's Hasina, she's our physio. We have Archana, who is an acupuncturist. Do you want to stand up and just say hello? She's got some lovely stories to tell as well. And we have our favourite cutter, Hitesh, the doctor. He only does cutting, he doesn't do GP stuff. So try and avoid him if you can. But if you do want to talk about surgery and things, he's your man. And we have a junior doctor in the room as well. He's learning to be a doctor. Okay, I think that's it. Are we ready? Is everyone sitting down? Anyone loitering outside? You know, can you have a quick look through the window? Is anyone outside? We good? I think we can start. Over to you, Jason. Thank you.
Hello. That's better. So notice there's a height difference. Hello, my name is Jason Patel, and I work locally as a GP, about 5-10 minutes away from here. In the break time, I was watching those of you that were drinking orange juice full of sugar. When I was first asked by the Summit a few months ago to present a topic on diabetes, I thought, well, that's pretty darn boring. I mean, surely it's just about high sugars. I mean, 15, 20 patients I see every other day about this condition. I mean, how much is there to say about it? And then I started reading a big document called the UK-wide South Asian Diabetic Study. And it had so much information in it that it got me worried about my own risk. And if I'm worried about my own risk here, then so should all of you in this room. So what I'll be talking about this afternoon is I'll be setting out what the problem is. Then we'll be talking some numbers just to wake everyone up. Then we'll be talking about why is such a big problem in the South Asian community. Now I'm going to use the word South Asian because that's all we know. We don't actually have enough relevant data and statistics for the Indian community. So I will have to generalize a little bit. Why are we more likely to get diabetes, and why are we more likely to get the complications of this serious long-term disease? Then I'll talk about the signs and symptoms you would expect if you're worried yourself, what tests that you can get done, and how we can prevent and manage this condition. So let's set the scene. What is actually diabetes? Well, yes, it is too much sugar. Everything that you eat gets converted into sugar in the body. And as soon as that happens, there's a little organ down here called the pancreas. It wakes up and it produces a hormone called insulin. And insulin helps push that sugar back into the cells. And the cells is where all the magic happens. That's where you live, work, breathe, and play. Unfortunately, diabetes, that insulin, that hormone, does not work very well. And if it doesn't work very well, the sugar builds up. And if the sugar's building up, it's causing damage in all of the organs in the body. So there are a lot of diabetics in the world. India is second place to China. You'll be thankful to know that. There's 65 million diabetics. There are 66 million people in the UK. Some of the comments on the slide here are from this study that I've been reading. And they've highlighted some of the barriers and the challenges that the South Asian community have with engaging with diabetes, particularly the cultural beliefs they have, which get in the way of embarking upon healthy diet and exercise. In Leicester, the South Asians there viewed their potential diagnosis of diabetes with some resignation. So they just thought, well, I'm going to be diabetic because my parents have it, so why do anything about it? And that's the wrong thing, obviously. Also, find that my Gujarati patients are some of the most knowledge-seeking, active patients. They always attend their appointments. So let's use that knowledge, let's use that energy, and let's try and translate that into doing some action. So first of all, I'm going to talk to you about some statistics, and I've got some props here on the stage. So remember I told you 66 million people in the UK, so let's represent that in mangoes. Okay? There's 13 mangoes here. Each mango is 5 million people. So currently, there are 5 million diabetics. 1 million don't even know they're diabetic. And as you can see, if you look at the pie chart, 20% are at risk. So let's put another 2 over here. These are at risk of becoming diabetic over here. Unfortunately, if you look at this middle bar here, or this bar here, this is the South Asian community. We are 4 times higher risk of getting diabetes than the general population. So this means and there's about 8 there. So 8 over here, 1 over there. Obviously, some of these will become diabetics, and we've only got 4 left here, which are the people that are not at risk of diabetes. And if you think about this as a representation of the room we have here today, it's pretty frightening. We're different to everyone else. I know what you're thinking. These people here are old people, or elderly people. They're not. They're women and they're teenagers too. A few weeks ago, I found a diabetic age 17. I mean, he was Afro-Caribbean, but he still shares some of the genetics. And our children are 13 times more likely to develop the condition in childhood than any other ethnic category. And the reason is because that they lead a more sedentary lifestyle and because of the genetics. So I say, let's blame our parents. Because why not? Unfortunately, we can't do that. But if you go back throughout history, and if you go back to our great-grandparents, they lived a very meagre existence. They worked on the farms. They were stick insects. They didn't have the high rates of diabetes that we do today. But it's because we've got wealthier, we started to eat more. And as soon as you become obese, or you start to gain weight around the waist down here, those genes suddenly become a lot more powerful, and they start to exert themselves. So once they come out, you're diabetic. So we're causing this. And this means, unfortunately, that we're 5 years earlier to get a diagnosis. We're 5 years earlier to get our first heart attack. We're quicker to get kidney and eye problems. And the most worrying thing is that we are much later to be diagnosed in the UK. Now, obviously, the NHS should accept some responsibility for not engaging with high-risk groups like we have in the room here. And we should be calling more people in for blood tests. There's also some language issues potentially. There are some cultural barriers too. I believe as a personality type, the community is more avoidant. We don't potentially want to find out if there's something wrong with us. And we are also not that great at doing exercise as well for a variety of reasons. Many patients say to me, well, I can't do exercise because I've got lots of pains everywhere, or it makes my diabetes feel worse. The younger generation, I hate to sound, is getting a bit ageist now, but they don't have any problems. They're fully committed. And I will have to blame again the NHS one more time. When you go and see your GP, obviously we don't have very much time, so we say go and see the nurse, and they say, well, do 30 minutes 5 times a week. But what does that mean? The problem with the NHS dumbed down advice is that it thinks that because no one's doing any exercise, any small amount of exercise would be good for everyone. It isn't. People won't do it if it's too generalistic. And I do want to, I think I missed saying this earlier on, but the amount of obesity in our population is about the same as in the white Europeans. But the difference is that we carry it all down here. And that's the problem. So what are the symptoms? Well, you wee a lot more, you pee a lot more, you get tired a lot more, and you get some weight changes. But that's not how we catch most of our sufferers. Oh no, we catch them on routine blood testing when they come to the surgery. And if we can catch people much earlier, then we prevent those horrible heart attacks and kidney and eye problems. So what can go wrong if all that sugar is floating through the body? Well, you can get stroke problems, you can get heart problems, you can get deep wounds on the feet called ulcers. They don't heal for ages, actually. Then you can get kidney problems. That's a smaller shrunken kidney there. And who's diabetic in the room, or who wants to say that they admit that they are diabetic? Okay, you know, every year you go and have the back of your eye photograph, this is what it looks like. So this is a normal retina, so that's the seeing part of your eye. And this one here is the one that's got the damage. And as you can see, there's lots of red blood vessels everywhere, and that's because the body is trying to cope and create lots more oxygen for the back of the eye. But unfortunately, those blood vessels, they're not very good, and you end up with little, where you can see them, the little red dots in the middle, and then you get the dark patches as well, which is where the back of the eye is actually died off. But thankfully, that's not very common, okay? So don't worry today. So I was going to talk about the 10 myths, but there's probably no point. Let's just focus on the top 2, which is that too much sugar causes diabetes. It does not. It does not. So everything that you eat gets converted into sugar, whether it be lettuce, orange juice, chocolate bars, it doesn't matter. We need the energy in the form of sugar for our cells. What causes diabetes is the fat. So if you're eating 100 chocolate bars a day, you will become obese. And that fat stops the insulin from working. And if that stops the insulin working, as you remember, the sugar goes up in the body. So the trick is try to manage the weight. And the other thing is that amputations and blindness is common. It really isn't. Out of about 330 odd patients in my last practice over 5 years, we had 2 amputations of the feet. Those patients were both not taking their medicines. Funnily enough, one was a healthcare professional, but I better not say too much because you might find out. So some of you are sitting there panicking, others probably not that bothered. But anyway, who needs a blood test done? Well, the government thinks that if you have symptoms, if you're over 40, if you have a medical condition like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, then yes, go and see your GP, get a blood test done. But there's a very special category that's been created, and it's just for our ethnic group. And it says that if you are between 25 and 39 years of age, then you should go and get a blood test done if your body mass index, that is how heavy you are for how tall you are, is above 23 kilograms per meter squared. So I've put a little table here, and I've lifted this from the internet. Apparently an average Indian female is about 5 foot. And so if you're above 54.5 kilograms, then go and see your GP for a blood test, and you fit this criteria of being between 25 and 39. And if you are 5'5", as an Indian male, that's the average height, sorry, and you're above 63.5 kilograms, then again see your GP. But you have to look at where you are on the height first of all. I don't remember being 63 kilograms for a long time, and yes, I have had my blood test checked. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that with the Manga exercise and with this graph here, is that pretty much everyone in the room is going to have to book an appointment on Monday morning, which is going to create chaos for the GPs, I'm sure. So, the most crucial thing that everyone needs to know today is what I'm about to say. That 3 out of 5 cases of diabetes can be prevented, can be delayed by following simple lifestyle measures. And that's it. If that's all you remember today, then great. And so the key thing is to reduce your weight. And if you do that, aim for 5 to 10% at a time, £1 weight loss per week, you will drastically improve your sugar level, your cholesterol levels, your blood pressure levels, your physical, emotional well-being. And the way to do this is that, unfortunately, there's no secret tablets. I wish there was, because I would have taken them myself. Is to buy a weight loss planner, set some decent goals, buy some body fat scales, stop smoking, cut out alcohol, all the boring things you'd get to expect. And I won't be talking about exercise today, because I think someone else will be. And you need to reduce your weight below 90 centimetres if you're a male, and 80 centimetres if you're a female. I say need to, I mean, it's very, very difficult, and I appreciate that. So what is good to eat? Well, if you're a diabetic, there is no such thing as a diabetic diet. It doesn't exist. And diabetic-friendly foods are generally a waste of time, because a diabetic chocolate biscuit is still a chocolate biscuit. So just aim to make your portions smaller, and make healthier lifestyle choices more often. Sweet treats are still allowed, but just less often. Avoid processed foods, and critically, go and see your GP for something called Desmond. which is Diabetic Structured Education Program, and it will explain everything I've explained today, plus talk to you about your medicines if you're diabetic, and give you some food options as well. And in these boroughs here, there's a lot of emphasis towards our community. This food pyramid is a bit misleading because it seems to imply that there's a special food group for diabetics, but if everyone ate from this, we'd all be better off. So at the bottom, we've got fruit and vegetables, plenty of fibre. You need to eat 5 to 7 portions of that a day. Then if you go up, you've got carbohydrates. Try to replace white flours with brown flours. Then if you go up, you've got your dairy products, and you've got your proteins and your fats at the top, where ideally we should be replacing your ghees and coconut oils with low-fat butter spreads and olive oils and vegetable oils. None of the advice, what I'm saying today, is totally out there. It all just makes sense. I get asked this question all the time, but which fruit should I be eating, doctor? I'm diabetic. And I go, doesn't matter, because they're all full of vitamins. They're much better than chocolate bars. However, if you want to be the teacher's pet, try to eat the fruits in the top category, which is apples, cherries. Try to avoid fruits at the bottom, which is your watermelons and pineapples, because basically, if you eat from the bottom category, your sugar spikes up like this. And it's the spikes that cause the damage within the body. So if you eat from the top category, everything comes out much slowly, and this is something called glycemic index. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about it, it's a bit too technical today. Mangoes, bananas are found somewhere at the bottom down here. So, yeah. So, you know, every now and then it's fine. What can I say? But as apparently, the Gujaratis eat the most amounts of fruits than anyone. So, you know, pat on the back, surely. So let's talk about the Gujarati diet because we're all familiar with it. There are pros and cons, but we'll go back through the evolution of time. We'll go back to our great-grandparents. We imagine them in their loincloths, working very hard on the farm. And they had a very meagre diet. They would eat rudla, they would eat plenty of dal, small amount of vegetables, because vegetables cost money, obviously, and that means their oil content was very low. And if you're eating rudla, well, that's not as refined as the chapati flour we're eating now, so your sugar level is a bit more even as well. They also had a lot of protein, but as we've become wealthier, we've started to eat more oil, more vegetables, we've increased our carbohydrates, the rudlis, the rice, and we've also added in some of the sweet things on this side as well, some of the mithai, as well as the Indian savoury snacks, churro, gadhia, all these kind of things. Instead of being a celebratory meal, they're now part of normal everyday existence. And what the young generation are doing, that they're eating all of this stuff, and that they're also eating Western-style junk foods, and that's been identified as a particular problem. Now, these are some pictures about my mum's cooking, and she actually made it today, so I'm going to have to be a bit kind. These are over the last month, actually, and there's plenty of good things, and there's a few things that could be improved upon here. So the first thing is that if you look at this picture here, we've got lots of protein in the mug. We've got fresh vegetables here as well, which is fibre. And if you're eating a lot of fibre, it slows down the absorption of sugar into your body. You stop those spikes I was talking to you about. We've got dairy as well, and we've got, this is going to be controversial, 2 chapatis maximum, no butter. It's horrible, but you'll get used to it, trust me. There are some things that could be improved upon. We could use a little bit less oil inside some of the vegetables. You don't need to have rice and rudli during dalbat. You could just have one option instead. And I promise you that if you eat this, unlimited vegetables, a couple of helpings of shap, you will lose weight. I've done it before. Just don't pick from this side of the fence either. And if you do exercise, you will lose a heck of a lot of weight. I've done it over a long period of time. So that's the diet section. But what do the diabetics in the room need to do? Well, you need to attend your regular appointments with the GP. That's fairly obvious. Please ask about the Desmond Education Programme. Please get an exercise referral on prescription. Some boroughs do it and others don't do it, naughty. You don't need to keep measuring your blood sugar with that little machine all of the time because it creates worry and anxiety. Instead, We've got other blood tests which measure your average sugar over the last 2 months. So you can't cheat your blood test anymore by eating a salad in the morning of it. And also, you need to start taking your medicines. The study has identified that the South Asian community are some of the worst, rates of taking their medicines out of everyone. 60% of patients don't take their medicines how we think they're taking them. And so we have to be gentle with them. We have to empower them to take charge of the medicine. If you have a loved one that's not here today, and you know they're not taking their medicine, well, quietly sit them down, go through every single tablet, get them to list the pros and cons, be very gentle and kind and acknowledge it, all that kind of thing. Remind them of the complications that can go wrong today, because you're all mini experts now. And then take that list, book an appointment with the GP, and as soon as they walk into the room, that list now becomes the agenda. Not all the fancy figures and tests that I've got on my screen, which I can distract myself with, but it becomes that piece of paper. There's no point talking about the data if the patient's not taking the medicine. And what we will do is that we'll gently, or a skillful GP will be able to gently tease out the information so that the patient can start taking control of their medicines, and they'll experiment on themselves for a month or two at a time. It's magic, it does work, believe you me, but you guys could also help a little bit as well. So basically, in summary, we're all at risk of diabetes. I hope the Mango exercise has proved that, although we do have 4 that are not at risk on the other side, but they might become at risk at some point in time. Check your blood test out, or a family member, if they're not here today, get them to book an appointment with the GP. I think pretty much in this room, I reckon everyone will probably need a blood test doing at some point. How often should you do one? I don't know. There's no advice or guidance on it. Perhaps do it every year if you feel you're over 40. If you're below that, then it's up to you, really. But encourage the Indian community to engage with healthcare by taking their medicines, and empowering individuals is the key. So I hope you all feel empowered today a little bit. So please take charge of your health. You're not defined by your condition. You're very much in control of everything. And obviously, if you lose weight, do some exercise, eat well, you can stop being in the middle category and you can go towards the not at risk group table, which is quite big actually. So I hope you've gained something here today. And these are some resources that I used. Diabetes.co.uk, fantastic website. And go to YouTube. There's plenty of Indian masses cooking low-fat meals on there for diabetics, so it's brilliant. Okay, thank you.
So the next session is a bit of a double act. So myself and Hasina will be running this. You're probably wondering why I'm doing a bit of talk around this. This is certainly not my field. Most of you probably know I'm a pension consultant, but at work we have stress champions, and in the last 12 months I've become one and just learnt about diagnosis of stress, but more importantly how we can help that. Of course, in the workplace, it's one of the areas that most people can become stressed, and therefore, especially myself who runs a team of people, it's important to see how we can help them as well. So I'll do the initial bit around stress, and then I'll leave it very much to the expert to talk more about how we can mitigate that. Where are my notes? Sorry, so just a few facts and a few stats just to carry on Jason's theme. So good mental health, what is that? Well, that is being able to think, feel, and react in the way you need to live your life. It's incredibly important. If you think about your day-to-day life, when we're thinking about some of the things that Jason mentioned, when you go to work, when you're in a relationship, when you have children, it's very important that, of course, that you are mentally, you have good mental health, you can make decisions, the right decisions for both you and others around you. In terms of stats, 1 in 4 people each year will suffer poor mental health. And common issues around that, there could be depression, anxiety, stress or maybe panic attacks, bereavement, self-harm, eating disorders. Some people resort to drug or alcohol abuse, psychosis, and even potentially suicide. And on that point, it may surprise you that suicide is the biggest killer amongst men under the age of 45. So it's it's something that people don't like to talk about, and that is an issue in itself, that people don't seek help when they need to, and others around them are potentially not able to have those conversations as well. So just to give you a bit of a test now to think about how much you actually know about stress, just by a show of hands, which of these descriptions of stress are accurate? So who thinks stress is pressure? Yes? Show of hands? Okay, so probably half no. Okay, some of you are sat on the fence, I think. So the answer is false. Pressure is actually just a part of everyday life. It can be good. So thinking about me this morning, I woke up thinking, God, there's 100 people turning up today. That is pressure in itself, but that can be a good thing. It's actually when you become overwhelmed by pressure, that's when you have potential physical or mental responses that can actually become stress in itself. Is stress a medical diagnosis? True or false? True? False. Okay, probably 2/3 false. So the answer, again, is false. Stress is a state. It is not a medical diagnosis. The state of being stressed, that then leads to physical or mental conditions, and those are the things that then may be diagnosed. It's a difficult question because you often hear when you're at work sometimes that, oh, I'm off with stress. And then you think, of course, that that is a medical diagnosis, but actually it isn't. It's how you react to that stress that's an issue. Stress, in terms of, is it a physical or emotional response to it? Is that stress? So if you know, that's what, well, I've just answered my own question, but that is true. So when you're actually responding to that, both in a physical way or an emotional way, that's actually being stressful. Is stress a sign of weakness only experienced by those who are vulnerable? True? Good. And actually, that's probably the one area that I think for myself in terms of my own learning, not to say that that's what I thought, but actually it's just being very aware, very astute, the fact that everyone is different, everyone deals with things in different ways, and therefore it's very easy just to say, well, you're a weak person, you know, pull your socks up and get on with it. That's not the case. It's very much everyone has their own thresholds, everyone's own mental state. People deliver things in different ways. Is stress an adverse reaction to excessive pressure? True? True. Okay, I think we're getting there now. So true, yes, stress is that excessive pressure. Can stress be a risk to people on an ongoing basis? True or false? True? Yeah. Is stress a joint responsibility between the employer and the employee? So many of you are still working. Would you feel that is a responsibility with you and your employer? True? Again, true. And again, linked to what I said earlier, is stress all in the mind? False. Absolutely. So that is all around stress. So causes of stress, and again, some of these are no real surprise. So in terms of the physical side of things, you may have a lack of routine. We spoke about diet in the earlier session, so a poor diet can actually lead to stress. You may have some sort of illness. You may suffer an accident that can cause stress in itself. You then have environmental issues, so it may be unemployed. You may lose your job. You may be in debt. Maybe even new environments. People sometimes don't like change, so a change in itself can cause stress. We then have the emotional side of things, which is obviously very common. So you may have issues with your partner. There may be some cultural conflicts going on. You may be issues within your own marriage, or just peer pressure from whether it's friends or family as well. You then have things that you may be walking, amongst the path that you have, and then suddenly you get a shock in the system. Someone could pass away. There could be a pregnancy. You could have a child, and people don't always react in a favourable way to that. There could be some assault, or maybe an imprisonment or some criminal activity that then impacts you as well. And one of the most common things or common places of stress, of course, is in the workforce. So just demands of day-to-day life from your boss, perhaps. How much control you have or lack of control can also cause stress. The lack of support. So there's a big emphasis these days on line manager support, stress champions that I mentioned earlier. And also just having just general relationships as well that you have within the workforce itself. And again, change, not all people embrace that, depending on also the type of change involved. So that also can cause stress. So it is a major cause, and people respond to stress in a different way. And it's important for all of you here today to recognize those signs, because you could be with family members, you could be with work colleagues you could be just with family and friends, and it's important that you assess that and then react to that in the right way. And again, Sina will talk about that in a second. So some of those short-term responses, well, you may have people who have blackouts or a dry mouth, very nervous, points of view. You could have people who are tight-chested, very sort of thinking about things or not responding to you or having conversations. There are then serious health issues where people just have more medical issues as such in terms of that stress responsiveness as well. So it's an area that, again, we probably don't talk as much. I think the physical side of things and the diabetes, yes, we're more aware of, but this is certainly, that's very important. And again, coming back to the point I made at the start, it's important that our minds, and we do have good work, good mental health, that is, to make sure we carry out our day-to-day life. So that's very much about what is stress, and I'll now hand over to Hasina to talk about how we can improve that and mitigate some of that.
So yes, I'm Hasina, physiotherapist. I'm here to talk about the link between physical health and mental health. So if you have a physical health condition, you're more at risk of mental health issues, and the same the other way, vice versa. So if you think about a stressful day you've had at work and that neck pain that you might get, or a headache or lower back pain, there's a link there. But also talking about diabetes again, 40% of diabetics have some mental health issue. So we're going to start with something to improve our physical health, some exercise. Can I have my volunteers, or not volunteers, Dad and Rima? So, if everyone could have a stand up, please. We are going to do 1 minute of exercise, 3 exercises. So you've got 2 different levels here. Rima's been dancing last night, so she's going to do a bit of a lower level. And then you've got Dad, everyone knows hyperactive Dad, so he's going to do the high level. So there's no excuses. You can choose lower level here, Rima, or high level Dad. So first of all, for 15 seconds, we're going to start with a squat or sitting and standing. So let's go, everyone, for 15 seconds. So try not to use your hands on your chair if you can. Push through your heels, try and go up, try and use your arms as well. You've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well done. The next exercise is either heel raises, so you can hold on to the chair if you want, or you can do it seated, so you can still have your feet on the floor, heels up and down, or standing, holding on to the chair. Or you can do jumping in the corner there. So ready for 15 seconds, go. Jumping or heel raises. Try and use your arms as well if you can. So that's 10 more seconds. 9, put your all into it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well done. Last one, if you take a seat, try not to lean on the back of your chair if you can. And then we're going to do either lifting one leg up at a time and trying to hold it up as long as you can. And if you can, take your hands off. Otherwise, you're going to bring your knees in and out, working your tummy muscle. Both are working the tummy. Let's go for 15 seconds. Go. Really squeeze that tummy in. Try not to use your hands on the chair if you can. Let's go for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well done. Okay, now relax. Well, everyone's doing it already, but slouch into your chair. Relax, lean back. Put your palms up on your legs and close your eyes. You're just going to relax for 10 seconds. Okay, and then open your eyes. So hopefully you will now have a bit more concentration after doing that exercise, so you won't be falling asleep through the rest of my talk. And you also will have, you can stay or keep doing exercise if you want. You would have released endorphins as well, so feel-good hormones. And that will make you feel happy, feel pain less, and also help with relaxation. You also would have worked your heart muscle and all of your body muscles there with using your arms and your legs. The wider picture of exercise and the benefits, there's a whole list of scary things there and the numbers that it reduces, but exercise can help reduce diabetes, risk of cardiovascular disease, falls, depression, dementia, joint and back pain, and some cancers. So Jason talked about averages. Now it should be specific, the exercise to you, but this is what a general adult or an average adult should be doing. So cardiovascular exercise, that is exercise that makes you breathless. That is to be done, or is recommended to be done 30 minutes, 5 times a week, moderate. So that can be gardening, walking the dog, or 75 minutes of high intense exercise like running across a week. And strength twice a week, and limiting how much you're sitting down or being still. So this summarizes me quite well. I don't like exercise very much, but I do like activity. So when my dad takes me out for runs, I'm moaning all the way through it, even if it's a 10K run and it's an hour, I'm always moaning. But I do love activity. So if you're not like Hansama and you don't like pumping weights at the gym, you can do other things. So this is when Anand and Dad went to a salsa competition, got some medals, and also Hina enjoying dancing. So going back to Jayesh's slide of coping with stress, you can tick quite a few of those off. So you can take a break, and that could be at work because you were seated. You can do that at a desk job. You've done exercise. You might be tired, so you would get a little bit more sleep. If you did it outside, it could be mindful. So part of mindfulness is appreciating nature. So if you did some of the exercises outside, it could be your hobby as well if you've timed it with another activity. And if you've done it with other people, you could have that high five that they did there. So specifically for our population, bone loading exercise. So that can be the heel raises that you did. It can be squats and jumping, but particularly for us, mostly females and the older population will have osteoporosis, and that is where the bones aren't as strong. If you were to fall, you're more likely to break your bones. So you need to be doing exercise to help that. That's loading the bone. And then, we're more at risk of diabetes, heart disease, stroke. So you want to reduce your weight if you can, and also doing that cardio exercise I talked about before. The other thing is movement, not rest. Another thing that Jason mentioned earlier, but people are always saying to me, I have pain, so then I took bed rest. That is the opposite of what you need to do. Keep moving. It doesn't need to be running or jumping, but keeping moving is the best thing for that. So we've talked about how to recognize stress in ourselves, other people, and some coping strategies for that. But I quite like this picture, and I'll just talk through it, although you can see it. The lady has fallen off the cliff, and the guy is trying to help the lady up. He might be thinking, why is she not trying to use the other hand? Why is she not trying harder? Why is she crying? She might be thinking, he goes to the gym every day. Why can't he just use his other arm and pull me up quite quickly? She can't see the rock on his back, and he can't see the snake. So this could be diabetes, and hopefully after Jason's talk you can think of the diabetes rock and consider all those factors that could contribute to someone's well-being, but it could be anything else as well. The two main things there of your stress or well-being will affect someone else, and just because you can't see the rock or snake doesn't mean to say that it's not there. The other thing Jason talked about is amputees, so that's people who don't have a part of one of their limbs. So if we take, for example, if someone has a leg cut from here, they don't have a right foot. And there's loads of neuroscience to explain the next thing, the concept, but they may still feel pain in that area. They don't have the foot, but they still feel pain there. So there's loads of neuroscience that can explain it, but if any of you were to see that person on the road crying, I think that you would all be compassionate, console them, and maybe help them with their problems, so walking them across the road. So with things like mental health, that rock or snake could be anxiety, depression. It could be other things like autism or a decision they've made with their finances, things that we'll talk about later. But just because you don't understand what their rock or snake is doesn't mean that you can't help them. There's some useful resources here. I think there's a few phone numbers, and also there's an app on a previous page, which is the mindfulness app. I think it's Headspace, which a few of us physios I do know use. It's a quick app that you can use on public transport and quite efficient. If anyone wants to ask me any questions, you can talk to me later. But in summary, there is a link, a big link between physical and mental health. Exercise helps both of those, and it can be quite quick. We did 1 minute. It can be quick, easy, and fun. Thank you.
We are all about sharing, so I just want to share a quick story in relation to health. So my dad was 64 when he passed away. That was 10 years after having a big stroke. He had blood pressure, diabetes, and so on. He had 12 grandchildren, but Dulcie's my daughter and she's here. But he never met her because he basically didn't live long enough. So no matter how you think about your own health, one of the things Hasina said was, you will be impacting someone else's life. You may not know them yet, or you may be being a little bit selfish about it, but it's our job as a Samaj to kind of make sure you get those messages and you take them on board. So sorry if it makes you uncomfortable, but that's the reality of it. Only you are in charge of your own health. The likes of GPs and stuff can give you advice, but if you're not going to take their degrees, it's a bit pointless. Okay, right, so just a couple of other things for the masses here, and there are a few. Endorphins, endorphins, yeah? If your leg hurts, chalvajon, don't stay at home. Okay, so we hear that excuse a lot. We've all got mums and dads and dadas and mas. We've got to make sure that that happens as well. Please go for your blood tests. Everyone here, I think, is over 25, bar one or two of you. So let's make the most of the fact that we're a special category and get those blood tests done. Right, I think that's all the things I was asked to reiterate. So, okay, I'm going to give you a quick 2-minute history on why we came up with this session on inheritance tax. What I will do though first is, actually, do you guys all want to hear that, or do the savings guys want to head off? Split now? Can't hear? Okay, let's split now. Okay, so if you want to go and hear the wealth and savings session, please follow Jay's way. He's waving at you. You guys can head off. You'll get to hear this presentation. There's video recordings. There's your other friends and family who will also be here as well taking notes. Okay, so there's a gentleman by the name of Cheer. Do you want to stand up, Cheer? Cheer works for St. James's Place Wealth Management. It's an IFA firm, independent financial advisor. So he and I were chatting as a result of a networking event, and he dropped this little bombshell during that conversation, which was like, hold on, don't say anything else. I need to digest this. As a result of that, I then managed to get in touch with Grant Thornton, who have a South Asia group. So they have a team in London of accountancy advisors. Is that the best way to put it? Tax and account advisors. Not just London, across the UK. And they have a team that specially focuses on people of Asian origin. So whether you were born here or not, they will look after you because there's special things that relate to us. So in a nutshell, and this is my very simple version of this, and these guys will give you the technical detail behind it and explain to you why you need professional advice. You can't just listen to someone like Sayles down the pub, because he'll know bits of it, but he won't know all of it. So it's important that you get the right type of advice. And also, if you are an accountant yourself or in an accounting firm, this is not about replacing you, this is just about an additional extra piece of advice. So it is worth having these conversations, like you buy in some services and do some yourself. If you are of Indian origin, or you can prove that you have got Indian blood in you somewhere, and you keep those relationships with India, then you have a special status with UK inheritance tax rules, which means that you'll have two estates. When you pass away, you'll have your UK assets, and you'll have assets in India. It could be land, it could be gold coins in a double, it could be money in a bank account, whatever it is, you'll have them in one of those two places. UK or rest of the world, and India. And broadly speaking, if you've done everything right, you will pay Indian inheritance tax on your Indian estate, which is 0. UK inheritance tax is 40% over and above, depending on who you are, 300 or 700,000 pounds. They'll explain all this in more depth. So you can, from that simple thing, hopefully you can get your head around the fact that when you die, and we all will, and the chances are, because we live in London, we've got expensive houses, and then you've got to include everything, your life insurance policies that mature, you've got to plan all this stuff out. Chances are, if you're a couple, you'll be worth more than £750,000 when one or both of you pass away, which means 40% of everything above that will go to the taxman. Now, as Gujrus, we're quite well known for grafting and saving, and we're very much about family as well. So everything we've always done is about normally for the best interests of our family and children. So I'll ask you to take this stuff on board, listen to these guys, and then have conversations, and they will be here. So these two are here, there's the other two guys over there. Have you got more people here? Or is it just the four?
We've got Anish Shande.
Okay, so there's a few Grant Thornton people around. Cheers also around if you want to have a chat with him. But Grant Thornton, as I say, they've come here especially. We've been preparing this for a good couple of months now. So I'm going to get off stage because this is really important and they need all the time they can get. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Richard Perry. I work within the Entrepreneur and Private Client Tax team at Grant Thornton. I've been there for 10 years now. This is my colleague, Helens.
Hi everyone.
So to begin with, we'll just quickly run through what the agenda is going to be. So first of all, it's what is inheritance tax and looking at gifting. Go a bit more? A bit closer, okay. So we're looking at the agenda. So to begin with, we'll look at what is inheritance tax, why are we talking about this. We'll then have a look at gifting. Generally, gifting is the easiest way to avoid inheritance tax, but it comes with issues with regards to control over gifted funds and things like that. We'll then move on to the more specialist area, which Shailesh mentioned there, which is looking at the specific treaty which exists between India and the UK, which can avail some certain and very advantageous tax treatments. We'll then move on to property, which generally speaking over the last 20 years, 30 years, people have been investing a lot in property in the UK. The values have become, over that time, potentially quite sizable, and with that, increased inheritance tax exposure. So we'll look at what can we do with regards to that, and how can we protect ourselves. And then finally, we'll have a look at the South Asia Group, which again, Shailesh mentioned, and the services that we provide as part of that.
So if we start off with what actually is inheritance tax. So as Shailesh mentioned, inheritance tax is not a nice tax, and it's not something that many of us feel comfortable talking about, but we do have to face the reality that eventually it's going to be payable. So inheritance tax is a tax that's usually payable on death. So what happens is, when you die, your executors have a responsibility to tot up the value of your estate, and essentially most of that will be subject to inheritance tax at 40%. So let's just repeat that rate, 40%. That is an astronomically high rate of tax. This is tax that you have, this is income that you have accumulated throughout your lifetime. You pay tax in your lifetime, and then on your death, your descendants don't get to see the benefit of all of your hard work because 40% goes in tax. You do get a nil rate ban. So if the value of your estate is £325,000 or less, you would have to pay no inheritance tax. But in reality, property prices being the way they are, most people will breach that threshold. Anything in excess of that £325,000 nil rate band will be subject to inheritance tax at 40%. It's also worth saying that actually if you're a married couple, if the first spouse dies and they haven't used up their nil rate band, a proportion of that can be transferred to the surviving spouse on their death. So, what's the best way to mitigate your inheritance tax? Well, the most simple way is actually gifting, because if the value of your assets is not in your estate at the time of your death, broadly subject to some anti-avoidance. Broadly, it shouldn't be subject to inheritance tax on your death. So what you can do is consider making gifts in your lifetime. If you survive 7 years of making that gift should not be subject to inheritance tax. Even if you do not survive 7 years, if you survive 3 years, for example, there may still be some tapering available. So that means that the effective tax rate won't be 40% on that gift, it might be less. You can consider making charitable donations. Anything that you give to charity is not going to be subject to inheritance tax if it's a registered charity. And if it's a registered charity, you can even get benefit from a special rate of inheritance tax. So if you leave over 10% of your estate to charity, that means that your effective rate of your inheritance tax on your estate is not 40%, it's actually reduced to 36%. So there's some planning around that. If you are philanthropically minded, if you do want to give gifts to charity, then it's a good idea to structure those so that actually you benefit from this reduced rate. Another gift that we see regularly, an exemption that we see regularly in practice, is gifts out of surplus income. So what does that mean? So let's just use basic numbers. If you have income of 100,000 a year, but you only have living expenses of 75,000 a year, you may wish to consider making regular gifts of that £25,000 a year of excess income. You don't need to survive 7 years from making those gifts for them to fall out of inheritance tax. So there are some benefits to be gained from using this exemption, and this is one that we see quite regularly in practice. There's also some other exemptions in respect to small gifts. So you can give small amounts on certain events. So if a child's getting married or a grandchild's getting married, you can give a few thousand here or there, and that's not subject to inheritance tax, subject to certain limits. The other issue that we'll come on to in a bit more detail when we start talking about property is you do have to be careful of gifts with reservation of benefit. So what that means is you can't just give something away and say, oh, it's not mine because legally I've transferred the asset, but you're still benefiting from it. That is a pitfall you don't want to fall into, because the value of that asset will not only be in your estate, it will be in the estate of the person that you're gifting it to, because legally it's in their name.
So, domicile status is something you'll probably hear quite regularly, and we always hear people say, "Oh, yeah, I'm non-UK domiciled," and that's not necessarily always the case. So, very broadly speaking, with regards to domicile, firstly, you look at what your father's domicile is when you were born, and you acquire that from your father. However, your domicile can then subsequently change as time goes on. If, for example, you're in the UK and you permanently and indefinitely decide to reside here, so you're not going to pack your bags and leave, once the children finish at university, for example, and therefore you might actually acquire a domicile of choice in the UK, which then means you're now a UK domicile person. So with regards to domicile, it's something that always needs to be reconsidered. It's not that you have it and that's it forever. You need to always look at your circumstances and what your intentions are, particularly if you're then doing specific structuring which relies on your domicile status. So one thing that we do as part of our team is actually regularly reviewing someone's domicile status and opining on what their position is, and also advising how they can make their position more robust going forward if in the event HMRC look to challenge the position. So I've just realised these are the different slides to what we have prepared and what you've got in front of you. So what I will just run through now, first of all, is, okay, what does domicile mean and how does that affect your inheritance tax position? So if you're a UK domicile person, like myself, what that means is your worldwide assets are in the scope of inheritance tax. So even if I have property outside the UK, I pass away, it's still subject to 40%. Now, the benefit of being non-UK domiciled is that actually only your UK assets would be subject to inheritance tax. So if you have your property over in India, you pass away, the UK authorities don't touch that. Now, there's been a change of the rules from April 2017, which brought in the concept of deemed domiciled. So this is when someone has been UK tax resident for 15 out of the previous 20 tax years. So what does this mean? Well, this actually means that you're treated like I am. So you're treated as if you are a UK domiciled person, and therefore your worldwide estate comes into the scope of 40% tax in the UK. Now, with regards to the Indian community, there is a treaty which allows you to rely on it such that any assets outside the UK are taken outside the scope of inheritance tax.
So you do have to be a bit careful with the treaty. So it's not just, you can't just sit here and say, oh, we don't have to do anything because we're Indian. It won't work that way. One of the things that we regularly do for clients, as Richard mentioned, is reviewing clients' domicile status. So, if you came to the UK 40 years ago to settle and you've basically built up a life here and you don't have many connections with India, then it is possible that HMRC would argue that you have acquired a UK domicile of choice, in which case you won't benefit from this treaty protection. So there are certain things that are helpful in assessing an individual's domicile. So the more links with India, the better. Certainly, OCI is something that was mentioned earlier, and that's also helpful in showing that you actually do have that link with India. Generally, if you are going to stay here indefinitely, there is a risk that you could be deemed to have acquired a UK domicile of choice. So the more links with India, the more kind of evidence you have that you are intending to move back to India to spend that your retirement, the better. You do have to be a little bit careful. So what's the benefit of using this treaty protection? So as Richard mentioned, any of your non-UK citus assets, they would not be subject to UK inheritance tax. It's important that your wills are structured appropriately, and we can help with that, because if you just have one UK will, then the treaty planning is not going to work. It is also important that you think about, well, there are certain anti-avoidance provisions. So if you had cash that you wanted to invest in the UK, so you've got an option. You can say, right, I'll have that cash in an ISA, and next door will tell you all about the tax-free benefits of having cash in an ISA. That's 40% of tax saved on the income arising on that ISA. But you could actually say, well, instead of worrying about that minimal tax saving on the income, you could just invest that in an Indian account instead, and actually save 40% of tax on the capital of the amount that you've invested, subject to the treaty planning working. You can't, for example, just say, right, I'm going to have a UK citus asset. So a house, for example, you can't just take out a debt and say, right, that cash, I'm going to use it to invest in India, because you wouldn't be able to get the deduction here. So there are some pitfalls that you have to be aware of, and we can help you navigate those. So we've got a little case study of something that we've seen regularly in practice. If you have a UK citus commercial property, if you've got a UK commercial property, that's going to be subject to inheritance tax if you hold it personally. If you hold it through an overseas company, so you set up a Jersey company, transfer the the property to a Jersey company, then what have you got in your hands? You don't have that property anymore. You have shares in a Jersey company. Those shares in the Jersey company could qualify for the exemption under the treaty. So that value is taken out of the UK inheritance tax net.
And one thing on that case study, which I should probably just quickly point out, is when you do transfer properties, you always need to think about other taxes other than, or in addition to inheritance tax. So things like capital gains tax, because if you transfer a property which is sitting at a gain, you can trigger a tax liability for the gain that's arisen. So generally speaking, you do need to think about it carefully before you do any transfers of property. But this is also something to think about if you're doing other or future transactions with regards to buying more property. Perhaps how do we structure that going forward rather than acquiring a personal name? Does a company, is it worth it in this instance? So it's something to think about case by case. So holding UK property. Now, a lot of people will have built up rental properties in their own personal names, and that's worked out very well over the last 20 years with property values shooting up. But now people are looking at this and saying, actually, it's not necessarily the most tax efficient way of holding property anymore. So rental profits, as they arise, you're going to be paying income tax, which can go up to 45%. Historically, you could claim deduction for any interest if you've got bank mortgages, which helped shelter that tax exposure. However, going forward, you're not going to get full tax deduction for that interest. You're only going to get basic rate relief, so 20%. So your overall tax exposure is going up. In addition, you've got that inheritance tax exposure, which inherently goes with it because you've got the UK asset. And also we need to think about stamp duty land tax, which is also expensive, and you can be subject to a 3% surcharge in your personal name if you hold any residential property anywhere else in the world. So one thing that people are thinking about is actually, is there something that we can do about this? And perhaps could we transfer this property business to a company? Because if we look at a company, the low rate of corporation tax, currently 19%, going down to 17% from April 2020, looks a very favourable position if we're then looking at the 45%. Also, generally speaking, the interest should be fully deductible. So again, you don't have those restrictions. So that's something that people are very much looking at. But there are a variety of things that we need to think about when looking at incorporating a property business. Because the default position is, if I get some property which I hold in my personal name, I transfer them all into a company, it will be treated as a disposal for capital gains tax. So if the value of the properties have gone up £1 million over the last 20 years, suddenly I'll have a tax charge that could be 280,000, and you need to think about, well, how do I finance this? However, there is a relief where you are incorporating a business, which means that there's no disposal. And in fact, the gains that were sitting on the property are taken off the property and actually attached to the shares of the company in which you're transferring the properties. So what you've effectively achieved is you've washed away all of the gains that have risen over the last few years. Now, those gains would still arise if, for example, you sold the company or you gifted the shares in the company, but otherwise those gains are gone. And generally, you look at this company that you've created as being a family company. So you're not really looking to sell it as such. It's an investment vehicle for the family for the future. Now, it has to be a business, and HMRC do look at this, and case law suggests that to be a business, you need to be spending at least, say, 20 hours a week managing this business. So it's not for when you've got maybe 2 flats and it's let out through an estate agent. It's more when we're looking at 6 or more properties, and you're actively dealing with repairs, finding new tenants, that kind of thing. So it does need to be an involved business. There are also some restrictions when we're looking at if there are debts on the property as to your ability to roll over the gains. If it's very highly leveraged, you may not be able to roll over all the gains, which then means you might have a tax exposure. So again, there's lots of technicalities that you need to work through if this is something which you are considering. The other main tax to think about with property is stamp duty land tax. So again, if we transfer these properties into a company, HMRC say that is essentially an acquisition by the company, and we're looking at full SDLT. And with the rates that they are at the moment, which can go up to 15%, if we're moving quite a considerable amount of property in, it could be a very, very big tax charge and generally inhibitive, and it would mean that you wouldn't do this. But again, there is a specific relief from stamp duty land tax where you are incorporating a partnership. Now, a partnership doesn't need to be necessarily a formal structure where we've got a partnership agreement and things like that in place. It can just be a verbal understanding between two people. So what we'll commonly see is a husband and wife owning just a number of properties which they both help to manage and keep ticking over. There might be some siblings that have been investing over time and again building up this property portfolio. So it's something to think about if you do have those circumstances where you are potentially acting in partnership and you have a number of properties which you are spending a good amount of time running. And this is an incredibly valuable piece of planning. You can wash away inherent gains and then also have a low tax environment going forward for your rental profits. We can also go one step further with regards to inheritance tax. So, for example, say you've got the properties which actually have very little debt against them. What you could do is actually borrow against the properties and then gift the cash and then moving the value to the next generation, and then the properties go into the company. We can also do things such as we've got shares coming out of the company which go to the next generation. Again, future value then arising from the growth in property moves over to the next generation. So it's a very valuable piece of planning which we've been working on a lot over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. So just a simple example here with regards to what happens when you claim the relief. So we've got a property value, combined property value, say 5 million. It was originally acquired for 3 million, so we would have had capital gains of 2 million. So essentially, we're able to wash that away, so there's no capital gains tax. And the way it works is that the base cost of your shares in the company are just reduced by the amount of gains that you've effectively washed away. So if you were to sell the shares, the gain would come back into play.
So more generally, on the South Asia group, would just sort of be helpful to elaborate on some of the activities that we do at Grant Thornton for our South Asian clients. So we deal with all sorts for our South Asian clients. We have a specially focused group. We deal with people who have business connections with India, property in India, Indian investors wanting to come here to the UK. We deal with a lot of that. And we deal with people like yourselves, people who have potentially a non-UK domicile and want to make the most of that. I think the key thing that I would like everyone to take away with them today, if possible, is that if you think you are going to have an inheritance tax problem, seek advice now rather than waiting till it's too late. I know it's uncomfortable. I know nobody wants to have these family discussions, but it's really important. Otherwise, there could be a problem with for the family later on.
And then, so there's one slide which hasn't appeared on here, but I think it would be useful just to cover off, is regards to your main residence. So when inheritance tax was introduced a number of years ago, the idea was that it was only ever going to tax the super rich, super wealthy. But because asset values, particularly property, have increased quite remarkably over the last 20 years, it's now becoming it's affecting a lot more people than ever anticipated. And generally people are looking at their main home as their biggest exposure to inheritance tax, particularly in London. So there are things that the government have tried to do to address this. They've brought in an additional residential nil rate band, which essentially allows you to increase your nil rate band from 325 per person by an additional 150,000 to relieve some of that additional exposure. Now, the issue here is that the actual additional exposure you can protect yourself against actually reduces if your overall estate is above 2 million. So if you go above 2 million, then you're not necessarily going to avail yourself to this full additional exemption. So it's only going to apply in that where the estate's below 2 million. The other difficulty is with your main home is that I haven't mentioned earlier about the gift of reservation of benefit rules, which is the anti-avoidance provisions. And typically, you will speak to someone saying, okay, I've got a property, it's worth £1 million, I'm concerned about the inheritance tax, I'm just going to put it into my children's names and I'll still live there. Well, that doesn't work. So the rules will basically drag it back into your estate and you've still got full inheritance tax exposure. So that's something, if you hear people saying that, it doesn't work. You can get around it if you start paying market value rent. So essentially you still live in the property, but now you're renting it from your children who essentially you've gifted the house to. So that can work, but obviously there's income tax implications associated with that. So you have to pay tax on that rent. So again, it may not work. However, if you are relieving yourself of 40% of quite a significant amount, then actually you think about the income tax you're paying is relatively low, and it might be worth essentially insuring yourself against that exposure through doing that market value rent. The other thing to think about is if you haven't, say for example, you've been paying off your mortgage for a number of years and it's now either gone or very low, you could actually think, well actually, I could re-leverage up. So if you were able to borrow against the property, the funds that you raise, you could actually gift those on or put it through some kind of structure which essentially moves it out of your estate. So what you've done there is when HMRC look at your estate, you've got your property, which now has a lot of debt against it. So it's only the market value less the debt, which is your exposure, and the cash has gone off to the next generation. So again, that's a good way of mitigating it, but it is subject to the ability to actually borrow against your home, and banks will often look at your ability to repay the funds and your income. So it may not work in all circumstances, but it might be worth considering. And then one last catch-all area, which has become much more popular, is the taking out of life insurance. So typically when you're looking at inheritance tax, the easiest way to mitigate it is gift everything away. But for the amounts which you can't gift away, for example, your own home, because you still need to live in it, you can look at potentially mopping up that exposure with a life insurance policy. And generally speaking, the premiums on life insurance is actually relatively modest for the amount of exposure that you can protect yourself against, especially if you're in reasonably good health, don't have any chronic conditions and things like that. So that's definitely something that's worth considering to mop up the overall inheritance tax exposure. There are a few things that we've not covered today, just because of the time constraints, but other structuring options such as the use of trusts, either offshore if you're relying on your non-UK domicile status, but also in the UK using a simple trust. There are limits with regards to how much money you can get into a trust, but they can lead to some good tax advantageous situations, but also peace of mind and a high level of asset protection going forward. So that is something that we look at and deal with very regularly. We've not covered here today. But as Shay said, we'll be around afterwards, so if there's any burning questions tax related, feel free to come over and I'll pick our brains. Thank you for listening.
You guys hear that clearly? Lot to take in? Okay, so I'll give you a quick summary of it. As best as I can, because I'm not a practicing accountant anymore, but here we go. Okay, so you're probably normally putting money into things like ISAs and thinking, okay, all the income that I get off the back of that is tax-free. That's great, but that's you avoiding 40% tax on, say, 4 or 5% of the income that you're earning on whatever you've invested. So, whereas inheritance tax, we're talking about 40% of the capital. So if you have £400,000 sitting in ISAs as a couple over the last 10 years, you might be avoiding a small amount of income tax by having it in an ISA. But when you pass away, it's £400,000 times the 40% tax, not £400,000 times the 6% return times 4%, 40% tax. So we're talking massive numbers here. So try and make the most of the fact that we've got this Indian origin. So one of the next sections is going to be, we're at Samaj in the UK, values are changing, people's interests are changing, but we've actually just come full circle and actually found that something really valuable in being of Indian origin here. Okay, so that was number one. Is Mafus in the room, or is he in the other room? Okay, so Mafus, do you want to just stand up for a sec? So Mafus is a contact of mine. He's from a law firm, and they do things like they look after the legal side to setting the wills up for you, and also that includes the Indian will. So we don't have to go and find a lawyer in India and worry about how's this going to work. It's written in Gujarati. We don't have to worry about stuff like that. He can handle all of that stuff, and he's working with the likes of Grant Thornton, and there's other firms as well, so there's a huge range and choice of it. As I mentioned, Cheer earlier on. But basically, we can try and do some of this at home, and Gujaratis tend to try and get a bit of free advice and then try and run the thing themselves. But when you hear things like, oh, I can't just go off and mortgage my own home and send 400 grand and put it in an Indian bank account, that won't work. And that's a very simple one that I picked up on. There's loads of other complications on that, and no one's going to be able to fix this after you've passed away. It's not something that you can kind of undo your will. And I know at least one person in the room who does not have a will, thinking, oh, it's just going to go to my wife and kids. It's not that easy. Get a will anyway, whether you use this stuff or not. Please do get a will. Make your life a little bit easier for yourself and your loved ones. A couple of other things we picked up on. So, actually, I'm going to ask the Grant Thornton guys. So you mentioned that you don't get the extra allowance on your own home of 125 grand if your total estate goes over 2 million. And do you know when it stops? So it's just of no value to anyone over 3 million or something, is it? Okay, all right. So it may sound like a lot, but a lot of us have got like a shop that we've sold or rented, a second property, and if you put all your insurance policies and stuff together and you haven't done your paperwork, you could end up into those numbers quite quickly. So again, please tidy all that stuff up. Trust and offshore stuff, it works well if you've done it properly. So please do have a bit of consideration for that. And then some of I guess the more Samaj related questions are, and this is a plug for the Samaj, if you give 10% of your assets away to charity, any charity, including the Samaj, then the tax rate that you do pay is only going to be 36%. So hey, we all win. So it costs money to run these events. Okay, the other stuff that we had in there, so you're going to need 2 wills, not 1. All right, so how many of you guys are planning to actually spend a lot of time in somewhere like India when you retire? I'm one of them. This is another reason why you might want to actually consider it. Or somewhere else where the tax rates aren't as high in the UK. Do you know inheritance tax in the US? Do you know whether they worry about this or not? We've all got cousins in motels in America, and they're worth millions, some of them. Their inheritance tax doesn't kick in till $10 million. So you've got that, you've got 0% in India, so we're kind of getting stung here a little bit. So plan for it. And it almost pays for itself to go and spend 4, 5, 6 months a year in India just to avoid the taxes. So if you open your mind to like, you know what, there's no point in the tax man getting it here, I may as well take that business class flight and hang out in India for 4 or 5 months. So, don't sell everything that you've got in India. Think about sending some stuff out. I am seriously thinking about putting more cash there than out here because you can earn good returns and the banks are safer there, some of them, because most of them are government undertakings. I'm a bit of an India ambassador at the moment, but when I've found all this stuff out, please, a lot of us, probably people not in this room, have almost washed their hands of their Indian origin, and this is just to show you, please don't do that. There's a lot of cultural value. You've got people, turning to India and the Far East for yoga, Ayurvedic stuff. We've got the roots. We need to really kind of keep those roots going.
Trusts are used for a variety of reasons. So there are a lot of the trusts that we set up are actually not for tax reasons. They're for asset protection reasons. So say you build up an empire, you've built up something, first generation's worked really, really hard, and they want to leave something to the next generation. Sometimes they'll consider using a trust. We've seen it for various reasons. So say they're worried that the next generation is going to make a bad marriage. Well, those trust assets can sometimes be protected on divorce. So it's just a way of achieving succession planning with and ensuring that you have control as to how those trust assets are going to be directed. Because you would set up a trust and you'd say in the trust deed, well, I want, say, child number one to benefit from all the income, and then I want the grandchildren to benefit from the capital. That's just an example. There's all sorts of ways that you can structure a trust deed. So it's good for succession planning. From a taxation point of view, it works very well as well for inheritance tax purposes. So we talked about the fact that the rate of inheritance tax on death is 40%. If you make a gift to a trust, it's not going to be in your estate for inheritance tax purposes if it's done correctly. That means that you might have a lifetime charge of 20%, but going forward, assuming you survive 7 years of that gift, it's only subject to tax broadly at 6% every 10 years, or when things leave the trust. There's a variety of ways in which trust can be structured, so it is hard to cover all the detail here. But if you are worried about succession planning, so if you are thinking, oh, how do we get stuff to the next generation? How do we do that in the most tax efficient manner? Then we would definitely suggest having a conversation about trusts to see if they're of use to you.
And one thing just to cover off there is that, with regards to your nil rate bands, if you're setting up, say, just a simple UK trust, an individual can put up to their nil rate band being 325,000 into the trust tax-free. If you put more than that value, you'll have a 20% tax charge on the way in. So if you've got a couple combined, you can get 650,000 in. You also do, it has a 7-year tail. So every 7 years, again, you'll have another ability to put 325,000 into a trust. So it's something that you can potentially build up over time. You can also put some assets in which qualify for specific exemptions, such that you don't have that 20% charge on the way in, and allows you to get much greater value into a trust. So a typical thing would be if you, say, have a trading business. So you've built up a business in the UK, the shares in that business, providing it's a trading business, should qualify for 100% exemption from inheritance tax. So what that means is you could potentially put shares of that company into a trust without any immediate tax charge at all. So allowing you to get greater value into the trust than otherwise would have been possible. So for example, if you sold your business down the line and had cash and then wanted to set up a trust, you're going to be limited. Whereas if you set up the trust whilst you still have the company, you can achieve a much better result. And as part of our team, we also work, so Anuj Chandy is sitting in the back, where he works with our corporate finance team, so dealing with selling businesses and realising the best value for the shareholders. We work very closely with them because there's a lot of structuring that we can do prior to a sale, and one part of that is potentially establishing a trust, and there's a lot of post-structuring as well. So if there's anything of that which resonates with anyone here, we'd be happy to have a chat afterwards.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, I know we're getting into break time, but there's one other thing I need to do. So, Dermot, do you want to come upstairs? Just want to get one of our members to share a little story that I think we can all resonate with, particularly the younger crew. So I'm going to let Dermot give a little bit of background about that. Thank you.
Hello everybody. Like Sailesh Bhai just mentioned, that I'd just like to share the experience of the current situation I'm in. I'm 40 years old. My wife is 40, and we have just had twins, and they are 7 months old. From what I know, that it is a bit difficult at this age than I would have been a parent at a younger age. Like at the moment, even my cousin, I insist her on saying that, look, make up your mind. The sooner you make up your mind, it's better. That whether you can progress with your career and have kids at a later stage, or settle down at a later stage, or you can do it early, whereby your physical strength, your mental ability and everything is much stronger. as far as I'm concerned, I'm 40. Although I say, okay, oh, I've got a lot of strength and stamina, but it's not the same. As soon as I had the twins, I realized it's like, no, there is a lot more to it. Having said that, even my parents are getting old, we are getting old, so things can be a bit complicated. I would say that's my personal experience. But the generation, obviously, I'm 40, so the generation I would address, like people like Savan and even Shiv, who's been over here. Sorry to mention your names, but I've always been advising that it's like, look, try to get yourself sorted. Otherwise, nah, it doesn't work like that. I've been in the situation. They say, yeah, you know, and then when the reality hits you, that's when you know there's some okay. It's not how it's meant to be honest. That's only a small part I would like to share. But
I'm Martin Young, I'm a director at Grant Thornton and lead the team in terms of wealth planning and wealth management. And my colleague here today is?
Yeah, I'm Peter Sathu. I'm an associate director, chartered and certified financial planner.
So we have got some slides here, and they're quite sort of structured, but we're quite happy to go off them because we sort of, I'd like to think you know our topic. So if you've got questions that you'd like to answer particularly, we don't mind that. If you've got examples or anything, we're quite happy to go sort of off in any direction that suits you. We have got an agenda, and just to so you know, so on your chairs you'll find some copies of the slides. They're quite small. If anybody wants larger copies, we can arrange that. It's not a problem. But we're talking the agenda. The agenda here today is to look at life stages of planning, to give people an idea of what we think you should be doing at different life stages. Talk you through some basic planning techniques, and then move on into budgeting and aiming for the future. So we'll ask you to think about what do you need to have set aside for, if you want to retire at 60, how much money do you need?
I've just realised might not be actually giving everyone the answers, so don't look at your brochures because we might be asking you some questions.
Yeah, and we'll talk about a couple of things towards the end there. So we'll talk about the bank of mum and dad, which many of us nowadays benefit from, and how they can help you. And there's some really important things in this group, particularly around domicile, i.e. where your assets are, and inheritance tax, which are covering in the other room, but we'll touch onto that here as well. It's really important that you don't make mistakes with the planning that could cost you a lot of money. And just as a very background, we form part of the South Asia group. It tells you there what we've been doing, but as a team we've got a lot of experience. We work very closely with our tax teams. We find that with the South Asia group, that tax is the driver and the important consideration in many cases. But the big things we've been involved in is the Tata acquisition, Pizza Express, going into India. We work closely with the Indian High Commission as well, particularly. So, I said we talk about life stages and ages and the needs through the years. And I think what I'd find interesting is to get an idea from the room what you think people need at different ages. So, we've sort of categorised people into different groups, and you'll see yourself falling into one of these areas. And I was just thinking if we could just go around the room and say, those that are in that 25 to 35 category, is there anyone in that age range? So in terms of what you might need financially, what do you think that's likely to be? What sort of products or advice? Sorry?
Annual figure.
No, what they might need in terms of what they might need to be doing and thinking about. Any particular products they might need. Buying a house and a mortgage would be common, yeah.
What comes along with a mortgage that you might need? Life insurance.
Anything else in that age group? What else might you be doing? Apart from spending your money and having a lot of fun, hopefully.
Pension.
Yeah, pension. Yeah, it's quite young to be thinking about pension, but most of you are now forced into that, aren't you?
I think we are going to show something later that actually, if you are thinking about it at that earlier stage, then you're probably giving yourself a bit of a boost for the future. We'll show you that later.
So what changes between 35 and 55 for those of you in that group?
To get married.
You get married. What happens?
Yes,
Life gets
yes,
expensive,
yes.
doesn't it? Your mortgage gets bigger, kids, more and more kids. I've got 5 kids. Can you imagine what that costs? It's ridiculous. And I'm still paying. The more kids you got, the more expensive it gets. Like I said, you move house, you need a bigger house. You have 5 kids, you need a bigger car. Everything just moves on, and life gets a bit more serious as you get older, doesn't it? As well, the nearer you get to that at 55, and the more you start to think about what am I going to do between 55 and 75, and how am I going to survive? Because you think you stop work at 60, for example, and you could live a long time. You could live for 30 years, 40 years. And, even if you just break it down to basics and say if you spend £30,000 a year, 40 years, that's a lot of money, isn't it? There's a lot of money you need to put behind you. What about the 75 plus? What do they tend to think about?
Mistresses.
Top answer.
Davidson, Ferrari.
I do. Yeah, some people do, but most of it's thinking about planning for when they die.
Oh, that's what I want.
And planning to help the next generation more probably, because you begin to get a realisation maybe you've got enough money, don't need as much, so you pass it on. How can I help my next generation? And that becomes really important. And then there's always that fear of expenses for health as well. You don't know how much money you need to put aside for that, do you? Because healthcare is expensive. So it's just sort of an idea of some of those things. So if we can keep some of those in mind as we go through the next slides, I think that would be quite useful. But the basic planning and getting the foundations right. As a planner, if I was sitting down with somebody at the very first point in time, the first thing you'd be looking at and saying, well, do you have an emergency fund? So the younger group should have an emergency fund. I know the idea of having cash in the bank isn't good. You like to spend it enjoying yourself and having fun, getting a better car and all those sort of things, but having an emergency fund to fall back on is important, and that's important for everybody. And we would normally say you should have 3 times your monthly income set aside to cover emergencies. That would be the standard sort of guidance. Immediate things, have life cover. If you've got a mortgage, you should protect your life. So if you die and the mortgage is paid off and you don't leave your other half in a mess, really. Or if you've got kids and you're paying for private education, you can insure your life to make sure their education is paid for. And those things are really cheap as well. Cheaper than insuring your car. It's an amazing number of people that don't do it. In terms of short term, then you would move into savings and cash ISAs and building up the cash to the point where you've got enough cash behind you and you think, I've got enough. It's doing nothing, isn't it? It's in the bank, it's earning less than inflation, it's going down in value. So then you start to look to shares and equities and building up an investment portfolio, and you start investing your money and it becomes a bit more interesting. And then longer term, the focus is always on pensions and for everybody, property as well. How do you grow your wealth? And as we said, when you get to 75, then you start thinking about how you can sort of get rid of all these things if you've got too much. So that's the basic planning stages. And what we'll do is talk about some objectives and some targets, how you build for the future.
So Mike, I'm going to rely on you to flick
Yeah.
through the pages on this, but what I want to do in this part of the presentation is really give you an idea as to the impact of delaying starting to save. So in this example, the charts look fairly similar, but what I'm trying to highlight here is if you're saving in cash, let's just say you're comfortable with cash, you're putting aside £500 a month, roughly. Now for a 25-year-old that might be a lot, for a 40-year-old it might be a lot. But in this example, we'll just assume it's £500 a month. And you want to retire at 65. So I want to highlight the difference of delaying your savings or commencing savings for 10 years. So we can flick over to the next page. This example here shows you the difference if you're actually saving into investment. So investment saving doesn't necessarily mean you putting money into an equity or an investment portfolio directly, or setting up ISAs in stocks and shares. Most people actually do most of their savings in investments through their work-based pension or their own personal pension. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is it basically cuts through all products. It's just the concept of cash versus investment and a 10-year delay. So if we flick over to the next page, this is really putting it into numbers, and it's actually fairly scary. So if we look at the first row, if you start saving when you're 25, £500 a month, you could end up with a pot of cash worth 530,000. In today's terms, that's 197,000. So in today's terms, what I mean by that is, if you take inflation into account, so if you were eyeing up a house that's worth £530,000 today, and you waited until you were 65 to buy it, then you couldn't afford it. You would be able to buy a house that's worth 197,000. Okay, and then if you delay that by 10 years, you can see there's quite a big impact of £200,000. Now that impact is actually compounded when you're looking at investments. So you can see here that by delaying saving by just 10 years, and people might think, once I'm 35 and I'm earning enough, that's a great time for me to start saving, but really it means you have to work even harder to save. And you can see that there's you would double the impact on your savings if you delay by 20 years. So as I've said here in this example, it's £500 a month. You're increasing your savings by inflation, so that's something we sort of have to get our head around as well. It's nice when you get a pay rise, but what you should do when you get a pay rise is actually factor that into your savings as well. So if you can afford to start saving more, which you can by definition because you've got a pay rise, then do so. Don't always look at your pay rise as extra spending money and more holidays and a nicer car. So in this example, inflation is 2.5%, cash is growing by 1.5%, and the investment portfolio is growing by 5.4%. And we'll talk a little bit more about investment portfolios later. We haven't really put it in here, but if you've got any questions on that, give us a shout. So really, we're demonstrating that if anyone in the room today is not thinking about saving or isn't saving regularly, then you probably should be. And the longer you delay it, the more of an impact it's going to have on your savings for retirement.
So one of the things I said first is talk about life insurance, and Megan said, well, and that's a plan for the unknown. What if you don't make it? So you've got all these plans, so we can do all this planning for you and put stuff together to make it look, so like if you put this much away, you'll have big enough retirement pot. If you put this much away, you have enough to pay for the kids' university and all those sort of things. But it's all having these plans together, but not everybody's plans run out as they quite expect. And you could take out a couple of things to deal with that. So if you've got a particular objective, something you really, really want to happen, you should protect it until you've got enough money to make sure it happens. I don't know what it costs to raise it, because it seems it costs a lot. I know that.
You don't know, no one else here will.
No idea. I don't have income, I just have outcome. But, it costs a lot of money. If you want to put, 5 kids like I do through university, that's a lot of money, isn't it? You need to plan for that, and I want to make sure that they go to university. It's really important to me. So I insure my life to make sure if I'm not there to do that, my wife doesn't have to worry about finding the money from somewhere else. So, just to give you an idea, I was going to hold that back in the clip. So, couple age 25 years old, if they want to insure themselves £500,000 for 30 years, it costs £30 a month. It's really cheap, isn't it? It's just, when you look at it, so mum and dad die, there's money there to pay for the kids' education, or whatever it's for, or pay off the mortgage. If we looked at a couple aged 40 years old, insuring for a shorter term, we use a shorter term to be thinking of as you get older, your responsibilities tend to fall away. It's still only £70 a month. When you think what you get back for that, it's £500,000 protection. It's something that's really important. If you take the first example, I imagine most people of 25 years old pay a lot more on their car insurance than £30 a month. And probably at 40 years old, you're probably paying more than £70 a month to insure your car. So life insurance, I'll just say, don't ignore it. It's the foundation of all our planning. It's really, really important to have. So what we're going to take you through is a worked example on retirement. So you can look at what you might need in retirement.
So most people in this room are probably quite a way away from retirement. some people don't think about it, but what I'm trying to demonstrate here again is that everybody in the room should be thinking about it, planning for the future. So what I'm going to run through is an example of if you want to generate an income, and it's a gross income, so I'm ignoring tax for now, trying to keep it simple, of £50,000 a year when you retire, how much money do you think you're going to need? So without looking at your pages in front of you, if you want to retire at the age of 60, how much money do you think you're going to need? So between 0 and £500,000, put your hands up. If you want to retire at 60 and you want to generate £50,000 a year for the rest of your life. And in my example, I've been quite generous. I've assumed that all of us here are going to live to the age of 100. So who thinks you're going to need 0 to 500,000? No one. That's the cameraman. Right. So 500 to 750,000. No. Up £1 million. We've got one taker here. £1 million. £1.5 million. Anyone more than £1.5 million? I've got a few over there. So that's at 60 years old. Okay. So now let's assume you're going to work hard, and I know a lot of people nowadays don't retire at 60 because they love what they do. So if you're going to retire at 70, so that's 10 years later, you want to produce £50,000 for the next 30 years, how much do you think you're going to need in your savings account? So 0 to 500,000, 500 to 1 million, 1 million to 1.5, more than 1.5 million. Okay, so what I found interesting there is that you think you'll need more if you retire later. That's actually the other way around, because if you've got less time to live, you need less money probably. How is it best to save? Now, I'm going to throw that question out to you a bit later, and what tax advantages are there. So as I said here, comparison here, capital value required to retire at age 60 versus 70. Now this is a graph, they both look exactly the same. The difference is the scale, unfortunately. So if you retire at 70, you're going to need about roughly 1 million, just over £1 million. So think about half of the people in the room got that right. If you retire at 60, you're going to need about 1.3 million. I think even less got that right. So if we flick over to the next page, it's difficult to see on the graph, but what I've tried to again show you that obviously the longer you work, the less money you're going to need in retirement. But what I really want to demonstrate is the scary numbers. You know, if you are planning to retire at the age of 60 and you want to generate an income of about £50,000, you will need a pot of around 1.2 million. Now, in my example, that pot is still working behind the scenes. So you're taking money from it each year, but the rest of it is still invested for the long term. So those are scary numbers. And again, I've looked at one end of the spectrum of when you should start saving, and the other end of the spectrum of, being realistic. Can you meet your long-term goals?
Just say that the interesting thing is when we often meet people, we talk about planning and how much they need to save. We meet someone in their 40s and say, I want to retire at 50. As a plan, we could go back chance. See, it's not going to happen. So then it pushes out to 60 to a more realistic objective, or even later. But most people haven't addressed it. They've got it's a bit like that wheel earlier on. I think if everyone was open about that wheel on the financial side, if you said, where do you want to be, and what age you want to retire, and all that, in terms of what have you done about it, if they're honest, most people would be down towards 1 or 2. And yeah, which is a shame, but there's time. You've all got time in your hands, so that's good. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I put an example here. Other than pensions, well, who here has a pension? Started a pension? Okay, I can see some people haven't. A lot of people probably in the other room haven't, because they're sitting there wanting to talk about inheritance tax and property. Now, I'm from the Greek community, and a lot of people, my friends and their families, say to me, I don't have a pension. My properties are my pension. Now, talk a little bit about the pros and cons of just having property as your pension, but for now, what I'm going to look at is the benefits of pension contributions. So I just want to demonstrate the power of tax relief in a pension, and I won't go into the boring technical details, but if you're earning about £25,000, so you're a basic grade taxpayer, and you're fortunate enough to have £20,000 lying in the bank, and you put it into a pension, essentially what you get, if you pay $20,000 into a pension, the government will give you tax relief of £5,000. So the net cost of your £25,000 pension contribution is £20,000. So that's an immediate 125% valuation of what you've contributed, which is quite good. I mean, if anyone here can tell me an investment that will give them an immediate 20% increase, then, you know, we'll talk after. I'll tell you details. But again, if you're a 40% taxpayer, you can see that you put 20,000 in, the government gives you £5,000, so you've got 25,000 in your pension. But you can also claim high rate tax relief through your self-assessment tax return. So that £1 becomes essentially £167. So it's very valuable. Again, 67% uplift. I don't think you can get that anywhere else for an immediate saving. And to demonstrate even more, I don't know if many of you know that if you're earning over £100,000, so every £2 over that £100,000 that you earn, you will lose £1 of your personal allowance. The personal allowance is the bit at the beginning of your income that you don't pay any tax on. So once you're earning £125,000, you have zero personal allowance. So essentially, that bit of income is costing you 60% of income tax, because you're paying 40% income tax anyway, and then you're losing 20% income tax on the first £12,500 of your income. So you might not believe these numbers, but trust me, they're true, because even I was thinking that looks crazy. But if you are earning around 125,000 and you contribute 20,000 into a pension, the immediate benefit to you is 250% of your contribution. So pensions are very powerful long-term planning tools. So for those people that haven't put their hands up, then you should probably start thinking about it. And it's never too late, because if you are, as I showed here, a 40% taxpayer or a 40% taxpayer and losing your personal allowance, it could be a really, really tax efficient tool for you.
The other thing with pensions, if you build up a big pension fund and don't spend it, you can give it to your kids. If you don't spend it, and when you give it to your kids, it's free inheritance tax. It's one of the assets that the revenue says you can give away.
So yeah, as I said, when we talk about property versus pension, if you have a big property portfolio and you think, well, that's going to go to my kids after, if that value of that pension is over your nil rate band for inheritance tax, your kids will have a 40% tax charge on the value of all of those properties. If you have the equivalent money in a pension pot, there are other issues to consider, lifetime allowance, but I won't bore you with those details. That whole pot will go to your children without any inheritance tax at all. So it's a really valuable planning tool. And what we're not here to say that you pile everything into your pensions, but there is a fine balance, and proper planning really will help you determine what a good balance is between the various different investment structures. So this is just a really broad example, and I'm going to ask you again without looking here. Whoop. Right, I'll nod when I need you to. So, in your lifetime, and this is a really powerful message. And I remember when I went to university and I sat in this big lecture theatre, and it was a free financial planning seminar. This chap came along, and I wish I never went because he scared me. Well, I said, well, he scared me a lot. So, broadly speaking, what do you think? If you've got a mortgage, let's just say you've got some kids, how much roughly do you think your basic spend is each month? So that's on food, bills, mortgage, nursery costs, whatever. Roughly speaking, £1,000 a month, £2,000 a month,
2 to 3.
£2,000 to £3,000 a month. I mean, basically the numbers are quite scary. So if you multiply that monthly cost by 12, and then multiply that by not your whole life, but you know the period of your life where you've got all of those costs, you can see that that number is quite big. Okay. So in this, I've got, I've gone through all of that, so we can probably flick over. So in here, we've got a net family income of about 50,000. They've got regular savings of any excess income, but they're spending £2,000 a month. They've got 1,800 on a mortgage for up to the age of 65. They're buying a house immediately, but they're getting a mortgage on that. And they're really lucky because their parents have given them the deposit as well, so that's great. So hopefully, if your parents can help out, that's obviously going to be a massive assistance. I didn't mention the cost of a wedding. I've heard it's quite expensive to get married. Maybe, yeah. So we'll add that in as well. School fees for children, and then I've gone to the other end of the spectrum and said, well, when you get to that age, you're going to want to help your kids out as well. So you've got a big dollop of cash going out. But then on the flip side, hopefully most of you will receive an inheritance as well. So in this example, this couple have got to the age of about 75. They basically run out of money. And then, well, their parents have passed away, unfortunately, and then they've got a bit of money back. But even with all the ups and downs, I'm just trying to demonstrate that you might not know what you need. So talking to a financial planner, or even setting up your own spreadsheet if you're that way inclined. I love spreadsheets. You can really give yourself just a rough idea of whether you're saving enough, whether your aims are too high, or actually your aims are at the right level, and that actually might give you a bit of reassurance. When we talked about sort of the health and mind well-being, actually putting this down on paper rather than just thinking you'll be all right, you'll be all right, I'll be safe. It will give you a bit of relief as well, help you out.
Something we do at the moment as well. If anybody wanted to sit and go through a session like this and plan out what you need to say, what you should be putting away, etc., we do that for you. We don't charge for that. It's something we just do to put you on track, so you're welcome to contact us to do that. And even if it's just, I want to make sure I can pay for the kids' education, or I want to do something when I get to 60 or something like that, we can help you work that through. So, anchor mum and dad. So quite a lot of help nowadays. I think people get from their parents. There's some gifts and things they can do regularly that most people do. So I suppose one thing is, I don't know how we keep track of this. So these are what they're meant to be able to do, parents. How they follow that through, I'm not quite sure. But your parents could give you £3,000. Every parent's got an allowance of £3,000. Just give that away each year. Yeah, no inheritance tax on that. So you can just do that. And my parents have done that for my kids. Give them £3,000 away. Just 3,000 each, not 3,000 to every child. And that's really good. It just gets rid of £3,000 a year, or £6,000 every couple. On a wedding, you can give away £5,000. Again, I don't know how they track that sort of thing, because it tends to be spent, over a period of time, doesn't it? Looking food, cars, halls, and all that sort of stuff. It sort of disappears. Some parents give money to junior ISAs for the under 18s and build money up. That's a good idea. The one thing I'd say about, if your parents are talking about putting money to a junior ISA for your kids, that becomes their money when they're 18. And you need to consider that, because that's important. I know we all think our kids are going to grow up great. I've got 5. One of them's bound to let me down, aren't they? It's going to happen. I don't know which one that is yet. I've got an idea which one it is.
5.
So I don't put money into my kids' names where they can definitely have it. Because I think they're going to be good. But one of them might get a party RV, and I don't like that. So you need to think about that. Help to Buy ISA, something available. up until November this year, get a bit of tax relief by saving up, get a bit of help from the government when you're buying a house, and that's pretty good, so it's a good thing to do. But longer term, pensions, everyone can put 3,600 into a pension. You still get tax relief on that when you put money in, still get that uplift. And then the parents can give money out of the surplus income. If your parents got good income, they can give away as much of that as they want without paying inheritance tax on it. And then trusts and loans, there's other ways of planning. And that's probably for the older generation to look at more. Important though, and this is for your parents, and it will become important for some of you as well, is domicile. So domicile is where if you trace back where you come from, essentially, I'd say. And there's special considerations for people who have Indian passports, Indian residents and domicile, Indian relatives. So if you read that statement there, it says duty, i.e. tax, will not be imposed in Great Britain on the death of a person who was not domiciled at the time of his death on any assets in Great Britain, basically, and outside of Great Britain. So most people, so my death, if I've got money in Canada, America, or anything like that, because I've got a British passport, I couldn't lie about where my heritage is just written all the way through. Everything worldwide will be taxed by the UK government, and I can't avoid it. And in some cases, it might be taxed in both countries. But for people who've got Indian domicile, there are ways of avoiding paying inheritance tax, and essentially there's two main criteria: having a will in India and having your assets in India as well. And again, that's more of a tax type thing. But just be careful if you've got a generous grandparent who's talking about giving you a lot of money. It's not always good to give it during your lifetime. It's better if they can wait and pass on death. You can save some tax. And the tax team specialise in that. And they hopefully the older generation in there will be fully educated in this and won't fall into traps. But yeah, before you accept a gift, just take some tax advice because it's really important. So, I suppose in summary, I think what we're trying to say to you is start saving, start being structured about what you've got money coming in, carve some aside and put it away. I know we all make our kids do it when they start earning, don't we? So you're staying at home, you've got to contribute. Most people put it aside and give it back to them a few years later. But you see from the examples that Peter put up, the earlier you start saving, the easier it's going to be in the long time. And I think having a target in mind, thinking about, for a lot of you, retirement's a long way away. But start thinking about what you might need and how you can start to accumulate that wealth. Because you can't rely on the older generation to give that to you. It's nice if they do, that should be the abundance, shouldn't it? A real leg up. But I think, and sitting down with a planner, you're welcome to sit down with us, but sit down with a planner and go through some structured decision making about what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to get there.
So I touched upon property versus pension. I'll quickly go through my views of the differences. And there isn't a right or wrong answer. Because property, we've all seen property in the UK, values have done pretty well over the last 30 years. But the differences with property versus a pension, there's various differences. The first one for me is liquidity. So if you've got a big property portfolio and you want to just access some of the value of that, really the only way you can do that is to get a loan. So you're paying to be able to access money on the value of your properties. Whereas with a pension, the good thing about a pension is you can't access it first of all until you're age 55, and that's going to go up soon. But it means that you can't access it, so you're going to save for the long term. But once you're 55, you can access that flexibly, however you want to. New pension legislations come in that mean essentially you can use your pension fund like a bank account. The way it's taxed is a bit different to a normal bank account, but again, you can access part of your pension fund, you don't have to access all of it. The other thing is taxation. We've talked about inheritance tax. Obviously, if you hold that property portfolio until you pass away, there's likely to be a 40% tax charge on most of that value. On a pension fund, there's zero inheritance tax. The other thing is taxation whilst you're holding the funds and actually accessing the money. So with a property, you know, obviously you're going to pay income tax on any rent that's being generated from it. And then if you do actually decide, you know what, I'm going to liquidate my property portfolio, you're probably going to have a significant tax charge, you know, capital gains tax charge of up to 28% of any gains. You know, comparing that to a pension, with a pension fund, you can access 25% of your pension fund completely free of tax, and then the rest of that pot is subject to income tax when you draw it. Now again, I talked about the flexibility. If you want to take out, let's just say you want to take out £1,000 from your pension fund, you can take all of that as a tax-free income. So if you've got lots of income from other sources and you're a higher rate taxpayer, you can just take a tax-free lump sum and not take any, you know, pay any tax on it. Or if, again, with careful planning, you can draw that £1,000, take 2.5 as tax-free cash, and then pay income tax on the 7,500. So, you know, from my point of view, it's more tax efficient and probably more flexible to put money in pensions versus a property. But I'm going to cut through that again, because actually, if you have a fairly sizable pension fund, you can hold property investments within that pension fund as well. So if anyone's got questions on, you know, what the limitations and restrictions are on that, you know, we're happy to help. But any other general financial planning questions, now's the time, completely.
We've got to wrap because we're out of time. But yeah, ask us individually.
I was going to say, if anyone's got any specific questions after today, after the session, because we just break it up, then just do stay behind, I'm sure people will answer it now.
Yeah. I hope that's helpful as a I hope it's made you think.
Yeah.
And if it just makes you do something, that's great.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
A couple of announcements before we kick off on the next, probably the most important part of today. Family stuff. Everyone start grabbing seats, please. Okay, so Doris is going to have to shoot off very quickly. He sends his apologies, but with two small twins, it's not easy, as he said. So, but if you want to have a chat with him about your kids' experiences, by all means, okay. Facilitators, do you want to? Okay, I think, is anyone table, who's on table 9 and 10? Anyone still sitting on table 9 and 10? No? Okay, there's one there. Gentlemen, do you want to come over? Okay, so everyone's on tables 1 to 8. Okay, so before James takes over again and does the next bit, which is family stuff, we've got one question for you. So earlier on, Alicia mentioned something about accountability and business, particularly for women. Who here has a business or is thinking about setting up a business? Who here has a business or is thinking about setting up a business? Well, I have a business. Cheer, you don't qualify, you've been in a business way too long. You could be a mentor, to be honest with you. Anyone, if you are thinking about having a business, becoming a contractor, consultant, doing something a bit different, not being an employee. Okay, there's a few people in the room. So, Alicia's just taken that leap. So she's looking to have business buddies. So she can help pair you up with someone that will help you take that step, develop that business, and go for it. Is that a fair summary? Brilliant. So if you want to have, she's just going to hand out a little sheet. So even if you're vaguely interested or just want to know about this or thinking about doing a business in the next few years, raise your arm. She'll give you a bit of paper that talks about an accountability partner, otherwise known as a business buddy. So please do raise your arm. And if you want to be a mentor in such a program, then raise your arm as well, because I'm sure she could help. Anyone else? Okay, all right, I'm going to hand over to Trace. Thank you very much.
So we've got 8 tables, but they're probably not evenly distributed. So can you just put help the logic is going on to make sure we evenly balance those tables?
That table's way too big.
The first video is just on social media. And again, is it just one take or one aspect of social media?
We know that engagement with social media and our cell phones releases a chemical called dopamine. That's why when you get a text, so you send out 10 texts to 10 friends, hi, 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 hi. Does it feel good when you get a response, right? Right? It's why we count the likes, it's why we go back 10 times to see if it's going, if my Instagram is going slower, did I do something wrong, did I like me anymore, right? The trauma for young kids to be unfriended, right? Because we know when you get it, you get a hit of dopamine, which feels good. It's why we like it, it's why we keep going back. Dopamine is the exact same chemical that makes us feel good when we smoke, when we drink, and when we gamble. In other words, it's highly, highly addictive, right? We have age restrictions on smoking, gambling, and alcohol, and we have no age restrictions on social media and cell phones, which is the equivalent of opening up the liquor cabinet and saying to our teenagers, hey, by the way, this adolescence thing, if it gets you down. But that's basically what's happening. That's basically what's happening, right? That's basically what happened. We have an entire generation that has access to an addictive, numbing chemical called dopamine through social media and cell phones as they're going through the high stress of adolescence. Why is this important? Almost every alcoholic discovered alcohol when they were teenagers. When we're very, very young, the only approval we need is the approval of our parents. And as we go through adolescence, we make this transition where we now need the approval of our peers. Very frustrating for our parents, very important for us. It allows us to acculturate outside of our immediate families into the broader tribe, right? It's a highly, highly stressful and anxious period of our lives, and we're supposed to learn to rely on our friends. Some people, quite by accident, discover alcohol and numbing effects of dopamine to help them cope with the stresses and anxieties of adolescence. Unfortunately, that becomes hardwired in their brains, and for the rest of their lives, when they suffer significant stress, they will not turn to a person, they will turn to a bottle. Social stress, financial stress, career stress, that's pretty much the primary reasons why alcohol drinks, right? What's happening is because we're allowing unfettered access to these dopamine-producing devices and media, basically it's becoming hardwired, and what we're seeing is as they grow older, too many kids don't know how to form deep, meaningful relationships. Their words, not mine. They will admit that many of their friendships are superficial. They will admit that their friends, that they don't count on their friends, they don't rely on their friends, they have fun with their friends. But they also know that their friends will cancel on them when something better comes along. Deep, meaningful relationships are not there because they've never practiced the skill set, and worse, they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress. So when significant stress starts to show up in their lives, they're not turning to a person, they're turning to a device, they're turning to social media, they're turning to these things which offer temporary relief. We know, the science is clear, we know that people who spend more time on Facebook suffer higher rates of depression than people who spend less time on Facebook, right? These things balance. Alcohol is not bad, too much alcohol is bad. Gambling is fun, too much gambling is dangerous, right? There's nothing wrong with social media and cell phones. It's the imbalance, right? If you're sitting at dinner with your friends and you're texting somebody who's not there, that's a problem. That's an addiction. If you're sitting in a meeting with people you're supposed to be listening to and speaking, and you put your phone on the table, face up or face down, I don't care, that sends a subconscious message to the room that you're just not that important, right? That's what happens. And the fact that you cannot put it away is because you already did it, right? If you wake up and you check your phone before you say good morning to your girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse, you have an addiction. And like all addiction, in time, it'll destroy relationships, it'll cost time, and it'll cost money, and it'll make your life worse.
So I mentioned we're probably more on Facebook and also things. I have children, many of you have grandkids. How many times do you look at the table these days and there's a big iPad stuck in front of your grandkid or team that way? You have to have conversations and no one's talking to one another. We're trying to come together as a community, we're trying to come together as a society, we're trying to come together as a family and relationships, have those discussions. So there is a balance to it, as you mentioned earlier, but it's something that, again, we think is a great thing and it is a good thing. But just again, that balance piece as well, and how do we use it in a positive way rather than a negative way? So that's some of the discussions that we'll be having. If I then move on to next one is around some action and keep your traditions. Do you want me to explain? So this is around, probably follows on very nicely in terms of the wealth piece, a lot of focus obviously on the financial side of things as well, but as a community again, how are we supposed to thrive and work together and search for that happiness? So this is Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, probably most of you know, was the founder of Apple, and this is some of the words that he said before he passed away.
I reached the pinnacle of success in the business world. In others' eyes, my life was an epitome of success. However, aside from work, I have little joy. In the end, wealth is only a fact of life that I'm accustomed to. At this moment, lying on the sickbed and recalling my whole life, I realized that all the recognition and wealth I took so much pride in have paled and become meaningless in the face of impending death. In darkness, I look at the green lights from the life-supporting machines and hear the humming mechanical sounds. I can feel the breath of God of death drawing closer. Now I know, when we have accumulated sufficient wealth to last our lifetime, we should pursue other matters that are unrelated to wealth. It should be something that's more important. Perhaps relationships. Perhaps art. Perhaps a dream from younger days. Non-stop pursuing of wealth will only turn a person into a twisted being, just like me. God gave us the senses to let us feel the love in everyone's heart, not the illusions brought in by wealth. The wealth that I have won in my life, I cannot bring with me. What I can bring is only the memories precipitated by love. That's the true riches which will follow you, accompany you, giving you strength and light to go on. Love can travel 1,000 miles. Life has no limit. Go where you want to go. Reach the height you want to reach. It's all in your heart and in your hands. What's the most expensive bed in the world? Sick bed. You can employ someone to drive the car for you, make money for you, but you can't have someone bear the sickness for you. Material things lost can be found, but there is one thing that can never be found when it's lost. Life. When a person goes into the operating room, he will realize that there is one book that he has yet to finish reading. Book of Healthy Life. Whichever stage in life you're at right now, with time, you will face the day when the curtain comes down. Treasure love for your family, love for your spouse, love for your friends. Treat yourself well. And cherish others.
So basically, you've seen 3 short videos. One's on work-life balance. So you've all got your own wheel of life in front of you now. You're all of varying ages. One thing I can tell you as a kind of older middle-aged man is who you were 7 years ago will be different to who you were in 7 years' time, and the same will apply for 21 years either way as well. So if you're young, look to parents, grandparents, and just see the journey that they've had. They've got wisdom that they want to share with you. All they want for you is the best of your life as well. So, and you'll get there. You'll one day also be old and have hospital appointments. And all that stuff that comes with it. And we will all go upstairs one day. So just keep an open mind about things as well if you can. So, work-life balance. You've got the wheel of life. You've got the tools from today to go in with that. Social media is, I'm kind of glad I didn't grow up in an age of social media. I did not let my son and daughter have a PlayStation, Wii, console thingy, because I knew that if they were anything like I was, I used to get addicted to Atari games in macro. So those of you old enough to remember that, that was addictive stuff, and this is 10 times worse. So sometimes you have to make those hard decisions. Traditions and so much, so I'll come back to that in a second. But I think it leads nicely into one thing Alicia wants to talk about, which is modern day relationships. So we are changing as a so much. We don't tend to upset people anymore, well, not deliberately anymore, sure. We try and help them in times of bereavement and so on. So the old days of, why they're not getting married, or they got divorced or whatever, it's not news or gossip anymore, it's just information. It's nice to hear when somebody does settle down, because it's kind of swung completely the other way, where choices are so vast now that a lot of people are unable to make a choice, because there's just too much information out there. So, here we go, I'm going to hand over to Alicia for a little bit, and then I'll come back.
When you guys are discussing things, you heard my story right at the beginning. As time progressed, my mom remarried, and so you heard my story at the beginning, and as time went on, my mom remarried. So this was a modern day relationship for us, and in our Samaj, there's not the divorce rate, it's happening, it's actually happening, but are people in our Samaj accepting it? Are people providing each other the support that we all need for each other? Because I know that when we went through all of this, we didn't have that kind of support. And maybe people thought we did have the support, but we didn't. So there's all these sort of things to think about modern day relationship, about remarrying. Is it okay to remarry at such a late age? Is it okay to settle down at such a late age? I mean, there's no pressure from, he's the guy that puts the pressure on everyone to get married, I think, but don't listen to him. But yeah, these are the kind of issues that we all go through in our Samaj. And it's the most important thing about this is everyone needs to be open and everyone needs to start accepting these things. And if you see someone struggling, help them. So when you're in your pairs, when you're talking on your table, I want you to think about what things are happening in modern day relationships that could affect people around you, your children, the generations to come, because these are the kind of things as a Samaj we need to tackle and we need to provide support for. Thank you.
Okay, so one more slide, and then I think Jason's going to take over and split it one. Okay, so it's Father's Day last weekend. We did Father's Day stuff. Put your hand up, Marty. You got that. That's right. Okay, so it got me thinking. This little screenshot came around, so I kept it. I think it's quite pertinent because the Samaj is a bit like a father figure. So I just wanted to spend a minute reading that and then kind of do life balance. You've just got to work with what feels right. And as you get older and you change, what's important to you when you're 25 and your career is everything is different to when you're 65, when you're just happy watching the Asna channel and watching Godlas and stuff. You don't really care about earning any more money. It's not important. Well, maybe not. There's one 65-year-old who wants to carry on working. But it depends. You will basically be a different person. And so we just need to kind of roll with that and be comfortable who we are, because otherwise it does have the whole mental health knock-on effect. And we've, I don't know if you remember this, but we lost. He committed suicide. He was only about 21, 22 years old. I think he was from North London. His parents were not comfortable with the path that he was leading his life down. I don't know what happened. I only actually went to the funeral and found out afterwards, but he actually committed suicide. Now, I don't think so much got involved in it anyway, probably didn't even know, but we cannot have suicides in any community. That's just extreme. And so parents need to chill out a bit, kids need to chill out a bit. You just need to be able to talk about these things. But that's the reason why I wanted Alicia to be able to stand up here, because that's one extreme case. There's going to be loads of unhappy people around as well. But we just need to kind of move on from these things. Okay, so again, you've got your wheel. Who promises to actually look at their wheel and not just file it when they go home or chuck it in the bin? Please, it's not for us. Look at your wheel and use it, please. Okay. Oh, we've got Rajabhai in the back there. The man with no wheel is going to look at the wheel. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. That's good stuff. All right, so from the Samajist side, I apologize if I've offended anyone today, and I probably have, but there we go. It may not be cool, but have faith, have some sort of religion, ethics, culture. Like, these things have survived for thousands of years. The internet's just come, the TV came before that, the radio's come before that. There will be cycles of what's cool and what's not. But have faith, belong to something, even if it's not the Samaj, just belong to something, some sort of group activity that gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling inside. Gujarati language, that will come up around the tables. So, you know, we've got one. We're still speaking. It's not one of those dead ancient Greek languages. It's nice to have a second language when you want to go in a shop and talk about the shopkeepers. And it's not Gujarati, so it comes in handy. Speaking a second language is a handy skill that it makes your brain work better. And again, mental health, you've got to keep your mind active. So, obviously a bit of a biased perspective on what that subject is going to be going down, but please do have a think about those sorts of things. What guides your moral compass? So we all do things that we're not proud of at some point, but sometimes you need to talk about these things, and sometimes you might need guidance on X, Y, and Z, and sometimes these things come from outside your own home. It's sometimes the best thing to do. Finally, special interest groups and reports. So kind of Alicia's touched on it. If there is any particular subjects that you want us as a Samaj to deal with, in fact, kind of write a report, put it out in the newsletter and tell people this is what we think as a Samaj, then we'll do that. Classic ones are, we haven't done this here yet, but in America, it's now common practice to not have to pay for all 200 people's motel rooms when they come in your jam and you get married. Because that's just an unnecessary burden on the family who's already putting out this one-size event. And so if you want to go to the wedding, you pay your own way. And that's basically what it's become now, because it's just unfair, that burden. And there's things like that that we probably need to discuss as well. How do these wedding receptions work? Is it split costs? Is it one-sided? And if we need to address these things, we should do that. I'm just talking about specifics. There's probably things in your lives as well that you think, actually, you know what? We just need to have a bit of common ground here. How do we do the Baramal general functions? What happens when somebody passes away? What should we be thinking about? What bidhi should we do? Or do we just send them off to a crematorium? Just let it be and don't worry about the 12th or 13th day. You know, those things, I don't know how to explain it, but I know the Baramal general is important. But please don't ask me to explain that. But I know a man who I could probably get to explain it. But it's things like that. So, okay, that's it from me. I'm going to hand back to Jason, who's going to make sure that the rest of the session goes well. This is a quote that I love. Not everything that counts can be counted as an accountant. That's quite cool. But not everything that can be counted counts. So please keep that in mind for the rest of your lives. Thank you.
Okay, so we have the 4 topics that we just mentioned, the main tables. What we're going to do now is a 40-minute block. So we'll have 10 minutes per subject. We'll discuss each of those 4 topics, 10 minutes, okay? We have 8 facilitators, so we have facilitators that will sit and rotate around the desks to make sure that there's an active discussion. The one thing I would like to reiterate what I said at the start, this is an open and safe environment. No one is judging anyone. I would like you to share your experiences. I'm sure you have got experiences that you can share all of these things with you. There really isn't a right or wrong answer, but it's actually very interesting to debate those topics and sometimes extreme views of things. Actually, you can sometimes meet in the middle or so.
like it's not possible to live without a phone, which is an interesting concept, but people feel lost without their phone because, as a few people said on other tables, your phone is everything now. Your phone is used for work, it's used for keeping in touch, it's used for, you know, knowing where to go, what time to meet someone. And it's kind of a scary thought to think that one little device is going to control all of that, but it's kind of the way we've got to. And although we kind of portray it as addiction as being a bad thing, sometimes it's not always a bad thing. It's about how you use it and everything in moderation, that was also shown in the video. You know, some of the downsides that people talked about was you can't have a meal like you used to. You know, some of the examples given at the front table was you have a meal and halfway through it someone will be taking a selfie. Someone will be like, oh, let's have a group shot, or you know, someone will be messaging someone that's not there at the dinner table. So it does become that kind of, people don't interact and talk like we used to, or they used to. There was also quite a lot of talk about comparison and people, you know, looking at Facebook, what's everyone else done? Oh, that person went on holiday, that person's wearing the great, you know, they've got a new handbag, a new sari, and it becomes a lot of competition, and people can sometimes feel a bit low about themselves for doing that. Again, an interesting concept from the front table was that people don't post bad news on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. People tend to talk about the good things that are happening in life. And linking back to the sessions we had earlier about mental health, imagine if you're that person that's going through a real tough time in life, and you look on Facebook and everyone is getting married, having kids, going on holiday, having this grand life. You must feel pretty low about yourself, and it doesn't help that situation because no one, as you say, no one posts the bad stuff. So it's just an interesting concept to think about as well. Trying to be quick here, but there was a lot of interesting discussions on the table. The other thing, I guess, that was, again, resounding across the four tables was about the voice and tone. When you pick up the phone, when you speak to someone in person, you know whether they're happy or sad. Is it an aggressive tone? Whereas on a text message, if you put a full stop, which I thought was okay as well, it's not, because it feels like it's aggressive or a matter of fact. And it's learning some of those terminologies that generations might not necessarily be a part of. I'm going to close with how people don't understand. Yeah, exactly. There's a whole new terminology if you're using phones. So just a couple of quotes, a couple of last quotes before I hand over. So, you know, it's the lastminute.com generation. Mental health was talked about a lot. Some people actually use it for company purposes, you know, not necessarily for social, which is a good thing. But it becomes a lot about inclusive and then using the art writing. So overall, I think from at least my discussions, and I'll pass over to the guys in a second, you know, people don't necessarily say it's either good or bad. I think the general theme across everyone was in use in moderation is okay. But for children, obviously, there was a kind of resounding theme that yes, it can lead to bullying, yes, it can lead to inclusion, that feeling, and it's our job as parents, or, you know, other generations jobs as well, but, you know, to make sure that they're safe, to make sure that they understand what they're using. That's all.
Pretty interesting method of maintaining a good balance with your social media activity. So,
hello everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for having me here. I'm here on behalf of Grant Thornton, and you guys have made me feel as welcome as I am part of your society. So thank you very much. Just a story on the social media side of things. So in terms of maintaining a balance, I have an iPhone and it's got this app called Screen Time, which I discovered. It actually monitors how much time you spend on your screen. So a couple of months ago, I realized that actually I'm quite addicted to notifications. I pick up my phone thinking that I've got a phantom notification, but actually there's nothing there. So I realized that actually I need to maybe switch off some notifications and, you know, make myself use my phone less. And the Screen Time app really helped me because in a day I noticed, you know, sometimes 4 to 5 hours out of 20 hours you can be sitting on your phone. And what are you
the answer from the tables was yes.